Chapter 2436. Previously, Tyrant had told Xiaochen that if he wanted to return to the Great Thousand World, he would need the approval of the Master of the World of Hongmeng. Otherwise, Xiaochen and the others would not be able to return to the Great Thousand World through the spatial black hole. Previously, Tyrant had told Xiaochen that if he wanted to return to the Great Thousand World, he would need the approval of the Master of the World of Hongmeng. Otherwise, Xiaochen and the others would not be able to return to the Great Thousand World through the spatial black hole. However, with Xiaochen's strength, not to mention obtaining the approval of the Master of the World of Hongmeng, he would not even be able to meet him. After all, Xiaochen was only a half-step sovereign master. With such cultivation, he naturally would not be able to meet the Master of the World. However, Tyrant could help Xiaochen. Let the Palace Master of the Cloud Palace talk to him. Both sides were world masters. The Master of the World of Hongmeng should not refuse such a small matter. Hearing Tyrant's words, Xiaochen did not say much. Immediately, the group left to meet the Palace Master of the Cloud Palace. As for the country of Lin, Tyrant did not care at all. Although the Emperor of the country of Lin had not committed suicide, Tyrant was not worried that the country of Lin would dare to play any tricks. After all, the 7 ancestors of the country of Lin knew what was more important. Either let the current emperor commit suicide, or the entire royal family of the country of Lin would be destroyed. Even an idiot would know what to choose between these two outcomes. Of course, Tyrant was not worried that the 7 ancestors of the royal family of Lin would deceive him because they could give it a try. He believed that the royal family of Lin country would not be so stupid. After Xiaochen and his group left, the 7 old ancestors of the imperial family of the Lin country looked at the 2 experts from the Immortal Palace anxiously. However, the 2 experts from the Immortal Palace did not seem to care about the gazes of the 7 old ancestors of the Lin country. One of them even snorted. "Humph, a bunch of idiots." After saying that, the 2 Immortal Palace experts disappeared on the spot. A small country of Lin actually dared to provoke the 9 Palace Masters of the Cloud Palace. Wasn't this courting death? Not directly destroying the country of Lin was already considered polite. Now that Tyrant only wanted the Emperor of Lin to commit suicide, Immortal Palace naturally would not interfere with such a small matter. Immortal Palace experts of Lin country left. The 7 ancestors of Lin country looked at each other, but soon, they sighed and flew to the palace. The palace experts of Lin country. Lin country of Lin. The royal family of the Lin kingdom did not dare to have the slightest intention of deceiving them. They also knew that in front of an expert at the monk's level, those useless tricks were meaningless. World. And in the world to world of world to the world to be. Worlds world. Was world. World to be, world to world. World did not to world. World. But after Immortal Palace's Palace Master became the Master of the World of Primordial World, he merged countless small worlds together and formed a new world of Primordial World. The world of Primordial World was even more vast than the Great Thousand World. According to Xiaochen's estimation, there were at least 20 Great Thousand Worlds. Of course, this was not counting the Great Thousand Worlds. In the world of Primordial World, there were a total of 108 main continents. These main continents were incomparably vast. Apart from these 108 main continents, there were countless other small continents. They arrived at a huge territory called the World of Primordial World. This was the center of the World of Primordial World and also the place where Immortal Palace was located. Standing on the deck and looking from afar, it wasn't difficult to see that the entire world of Primordial World was enveloped by a huge array. This wasn't an offensive array or a defensive array because Immortal Palace didn't need these things. With Immortal Palace's ruling power, there wasn't a single force in the world of Primordial World that dared to offend Immortal Palace. Therefore, Immortal Palace didn't need any offensive or defensive array to protect the world of Primordial World. Just the 2 words Immortal Palace alone was enough to intimidate all thieves and thieves. This array that enveloped the entire world of primordial world was a pure spirit-gathering array. However, its grade was so high that even the two vice-masters of the Talisman Gate were shocked. Xiaochen didn't know much about Talisman Dao, but the two vice-masters of the Talisman Gate were very knowledgeable. Looking at the spirit-gathering array that enveloped the entire world of primordial world, the two vice-masters of the Talisman Gate exclaimed in shock. This is a spirit-gathering array that surpasses the immortal grade. That's right, this array has reached the ancestor grade. Monk said with a smile. A spirit-gathering array that surpassed the immortal grade was so huge that it enveloped the entire world of primordial world. It was hard to imagine how rich the world of primordial world was with such a spirit-gathering array. Under the guidance of Tyrant, Taoist priest, Qin Feng, and the rest, the group entered the Hong-Meng continent without a hitch. However, after passing through the spirit-gathering array, Xiaochen and the rest felt as though they had entered another world. The entire Hong-Meng continent's spiritual energy was so dense that it had turned into mist. The air was filled with tiny droplets of spiritual energy, and the entire Hong-Meng continent gave people a warm and gentle feeling. The density of the spiritual energy here was no weaker than the cultivation mystic realms in the top 10 Ling Tian sects. The spirit energy of the entire continent had already surpassed the cultivation mystic realms of the 10 great Ling Tian sects. One could imagine how big the gap was between the boundless world and the primordial world. This was the gap between the foundation of both sides. Xiaochen and the others were shocked, but Tyrant and Taoist priest remained calm. After all, even though the spiritual energy in the Hong-Meng continent was pretty good, the same couldn't be said for the outside world. When they arrived at the center of the Hong-Meng world, they saw countless pavilions and pavilions. This was where the Immortal Palace was located. It was indeed a paradise on earth. Beside the Immortal Palace, there was a huge palace floating in the air. Tyrant, Taoist priest, and the rest brought Xiaochen to this palace. This palace could be seen as a huge starship. However, compared to a starship, this palace was definitely of a much higher grade. This was the temporary residence of the Cloud Palace's members. Ever since they set off from the boundless world, they had been living in this palace. The spatial spirit boat slowly descended. Qin Feng didn't say anything and left immediately. Compared to Tyrant and Taoist priest, Qin Feng was extremely cold. Tyrant, on the other hand, personally arranged accommodation for Xiaochen and the rest. He then smiled at Xiaochen. "Brother Xiaochen, please wait for a moment. I will go and see the palace master first. I will send someone to inform you when the time comes." Even with Tyrant's recommendation, Xiaochen obviously couldn't meet the palace master of the Cloud Palace casually. At the very least, Tyrant had to explain things to him first. In response, Xiaochen just smiled and nodded. He didn't say anything else. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 2437. Xiaochen and the others wanted to go back on the Great Thousand World. This was not a big problem for Tyrant as long as his palace master and the Immortal Palace Master talked about it. Xiaochen and the others wanted to go back on the Great Thousand World. This was not a big problem for Tyrant as long as his palace master and the Immortal Palace Master talked about it. There were some things that were difficult to do when the two sides were not on the same level. However, once the two sides were on the same level, it would be very simple. For example, if Xiaochen were to deal with this matter by himself, he might not even be able to meet the Immortal Palace Master, let alone get him to agree. However, if the Palace Master of the Cloud Palace was to talk about it, it would be completely different. Because the Palace Master of the Cloud Palace and the Immortal Palace Master were on the same level, since the Palace Master had spoken, and this was not a difficult matter for the Immortal Palace Master, it was naturally impossible for him to refuse. The monk went to meet the Palace Lord of the Cloud Palace, while Xiaochen and the others rested in the cave that the monk had arranged for them. The palace of the Cloud Palace was indeed extraordinary, and the spiritual qi was so abundant that it was astonishing. However, for Xiaochen, who had been to the World Energy Spring in the Great Thousand World, this was nothing. However, it was different for Long Qing, Xian Yuan Ling, and the others. They had never seen such abundant world energy before, so they could not help but cultivate. It was definitely a good thing to be able to cultivate here. Everyone was busy cultivating. At night, Xiaochen felt a little complicated. This time, he came to the Hongmeng world by chance, and it was indeed an eye-opener for Xiaochen. At the same time, there was an indescribable feeling rising in Xiaochen's heart. There really is a mountain beyond a mountain, and a person beyond a person. Xiaochen sighed softly. He felt that the people in the Great Thousand World were indeed frogs at the bottom of a well. However, this could not be blamed on anyone. After all, no one was born with a high vision. Sometimes, one had to experience some things to understand how big the world was. Just like this time, if Xiaochen did not come to the Hongmeng world by accident, would he know the situation outside the Great Thousand World? Would he know that there were Ancestor Realm Masters above the Emperor Realm? Would he know that there were World Masters in every universe? It was because he saw the vastness of the world with his own eyes that there were so many Masters outside of the Great Thousand World that Xiaochen had such a deep thought. The situation before was still too small. Look at the primordial world and the great world. They had already passed the matter of internal strife long ago. Their eyes were already on the other universes. Of course, Xiaochen also knew the rules. Xiaochen did not violate any taboos of the rules to Xiao. Xiaochen. As. Obviously, everyone knew who Xiaochen was. He seemed to be someone from another universe who was brought back by the monk and the Taoist priest. They were also very curious about Xiaochen. He was a cultivator from another universe. They were curious about everything in the Immortal Palace world. Now, there was someone from another universe. Naturally, the Immortal Palace world disciples could not help but want to see how different Xiaochen was from them. Along the way, Xiaochen felt the gazes of the Immortal Palace world disciples on him. Similarly, he also secretly sensed these Immortal Palace world disciples. The number of disciples who could follow the Immortal Palace to the Immortal Palace world was not much. There were 10 million of them. But they were all elite disciples of the Immortal Palace. As the master of the Great Thousand World, the Immortal Palace world had more than 1 million disciples. Among these 10 to 20,000 disciples, not a single one of them was lower than the comprehension realm. There were even many end realm disciples. It was not difficult to see how powerful the Immortal Palace world was just from the disciples. One must know that the 10 sword maniacs of the sword sect, namely Qin Kunlun and the others, were only in the Tao realm. Moreover, they had just broken through not long ago. With such cultivation, they were already the strongest disciples in the sword sect. But in the Immortal Palace, they were ordinary. There was nothing special about them. The Immortal Palace world disciples looked at Xiaochen curiously. However, no one came to disturb Xiaochen. At most, they just looked at him curiously. Unknowingly, Xiaochen did not know where he was. After all, it was his first time in the Immortal Palace. It seemed like he had come to the entrance of a small world. No one stopped. After looking around, Xiaochen also stepped into the small world curiously. The small world was not big. However, it had green mountains and clear waters. The scenery was picturesque. Looking around, it was indeed a place that did not belong to him. He strolled around. This place was not bad. However, Xiaochen soon came to the bottom of a waterfall. The water of the waterfall gave off a loud roar. Below it was a lake. However, at this moment, there was a young man in gray who was practicing his sword skills on the lake. The young man stood on the lake and waved the long sword in his hand. At times, it was light and agile. At other times, it was domineering and fierce. Xiaochen had seen this young man before. It was Qin Feng, who had returned with him in the day. He seemed to be one of the 9 palace masters of the Immortal Palace, just like the monk in the Taoist. When he was in the Lin country, Qin Feng's sword had left a deep impression on Xiaochen. He did not expect to see it again. Looking at the figure of Qin Feng practicing his sword skills, Xiaochen unknowingly fell into a trance. Xiaochen could be said to be standing at the peak of the Great Thousand World in terms of sword skills comprehension. Even the experts of the older generation didn't dare to say that they could defeat Xiaochen in terms of sword skills. Therefore, in the Great Thousand World, Xiaochen felt lonely at the top because no one could discuss and exchange sword skills with him. Unfortunately, Jun Weiyao wasn't an expert in sword skills either. However, looking at Qin Feng before him, Xiaochen felt enlightened. It turned out that the way of sword skills could also be like this. He had to admit that Qin Feng's comprehension of the sword Dao was clearly much deeper than his. Although the sword technique that Qin Feng was brandishing wasn't a superb sword technique, there was no doubt that Qin Feng's understanding had been added into it. In the hands of Qin Feng, such an ordinary sword skill actually gave off a completely different feeling. It was as though there was an additional soul that filled the entire set of sword skills with spirituality. Xiaochen was in a trance. He was definitely interested in sword skills. Now that he saw someone who could actually comprehend sword skills to such a level, Xiaochen couldn't help but fall into a trance. All that was left in his eyes was the image of Qin Feng practicing his sword skills. Seeking collection, monthly votes, recommendations. Chapter 2438. Xiaochen was in a daze. After all, Qin Feng's swordsmanship was the strongest he had ever seen. He thought that his understanding of swordsmanship was close to the peak, but compared to Qin Feng, there was still a big gap. While Xiaochen was in a daze, Qin Feng, who was practicing his swordsmanship, stabbed his sword toward Xiaochen without any warning. Qin Feng did not use any cultivation in this attack. He only used a pure swordsmanship attack. Seeing that Qin Feng's sword was piercing toward him like the peak of a mountain, Xiaochen instinctively moved his mind. The dustless sword instantly appeared in his hand and collided with Qin Feng's long sword. The tip of the two long swords collided fiercely. At the same time, neither of them used any spiritual power. After the collision, Qin Feng did not choose to stop. Instead, he stabbed his sword again. Seeing this, Xiaochen did not show any weakness and also counterattacked. At the lakeside, Xiaochen and Qin Feng were locked in a fierce battle. Of course, both of them were purely competing with swordsmanship. However, as time passed, Xiaochen gradually fell into a disadvantageous position when it came to swordsmanship. Compared to Qin Feng, Xiaochen's understanding of swordsmanship was indeed a little lacking. This was undeniable. Even if they did not use their cultivation, Qin Feng could still rely on his own understanding of swordsmanship to gradually gain the upper hand. However, even if he was at a disadvantage, Xiaochen still benefited a lot. Originally, in the Great Thousand World, Xiaochen's swordsmanship could be said to have reached a plateau. After all, as a swordsman, Xiaochen could be considered to be at the top of the Great Thousand World. No one could surpass him in terms of pure understanding of swordsmanship, including those sovereigns. Because there was no opponent in the Great Thousand World, Xiaochen's swordsmanship had improved very slowly in recent years. This was something that could not be helped. When anything reached a peak, it would become extremely difficult to improve and break through again. After all, it was too difficult to surpass the peak. However, now, Qin Feng's appearance was like telling Xiaochen that his swordsmanship was far from reaching the peak. In addition, with a sword master like Qin Feng, Xiaochen could clearly feel that his swordsmanship was improving rapidly. This was like many things that one thought were perfect suddenly became not so perfect. There were mistakes and loopholes, because only in this way would there be room for improvement. However, if one thought that something was perfect and there were no loopholes, it would be the most difficult to improve it. Just like Xiaochen before, he was unable to find any major mistakes in his own swordsmanship. Under such circumstances, it would be very difficult for Xiaochen to improve his swordsmanship. It could even be said that it was impossible for him to do so. However, now, as he fought with Qin Feng, Xiaochen found that, or rather, Qin Feng pointed out many loopholes in Xiaochen's swordsmanship. Originally, it should have been perfect, but under Qin Feng's sword, there were loopholes. As a result, Xiaochen naturally had the most intuitive feeling. He sighed in his heart, it turns out that my swordsmanship still has so many loopholes. The battle did not last long. After about 15 minutes, Qin Feng took the initiative to stop his movements. Seeing this, Xiaochen did not continue to attack, although he felt that it was not enough. Qin Feng's long sword was sheathed. His face was calm as he looked at Xiaochen without the slightest expression. Your talent is not bad, but your understanding of swordsmanship is not enough. This was the first time that someone said that his understanding of swordsmanship was not enough. However, Xiaochen did not refute this. He knew that Qin Feng was telling the truth. This was because Xiaochen had sensed from the very beginning that Qin Feng had already gone easy on him during the fight. Otherwise, he would not have been able to hold on for so long. Moreover, rather than saying that they were exchanging pointers, it was better to say that Qin Feng was giving him pointers. After all, with Xiaochen's current strength, he was far from qualified to exchange pointers with Qin Feng. Regardless of whether it was the understanding of swordsmanship or the cultivation realm, there was a big gap between Xiaochen and Qin Feng. Hearing Qin Feng's words, Xiaochen cupped his hands and bowed. Thank you, senior. Although Qin Feng looked about the same age as him, Xiaochen still respectfully addressed him as senior. Regarding this, Qin Feng did not say anything. He turned around, looked at the lake in the distance, and said faintly, "The monk said that you came from a universe called the Great Thousand World?" "Yes." Hearing this, Xiaochen nodded and replied, "The Great Thousand World, how is it?" "It can't be compared to the primordial world and the Great World." Qin Feng was also curious about the Great Thousand World. Therefore, he asked. Xiaochen also answered truthfully. Compared to the primordial world and the Great World, the Great Thousand World was indeed not comparable. It was the result of being completely crushed in all aspects. Hearing Xiaochen's answer, Qin Feng's expression did not change much. After a moment of silence, he said faintly, "Do you know how many realms there are?" "The realms of swordsmanship?" Xiaochen had never heard of this before. Seeing this, Qin Feng did not wait for Xiaochen to reply. He let out a breath of turbid air and continued. At the initial stage of swordsmanship, comprehending the way of swordsmanship, becoming one with the sword, having the sword in the heart, no sword in the heart, and the way of swordsmanship is divine. Qin Feng said slowly. Hearing Qin Feng's words, Xiaochen frowned slightly. Xiaochen had indeed never come into contact with the realms of swordsmanship. However, after hearing Qin Feng's words, Xiaochen had a slight understanding. At the initial stage of swordsmanship, comprehending the way of swordsmanship, becoming one with the sword, having the sword in the heart, Xiaochen could understand what these meant. However, there was no sword in the heart, and the way of swordsmanship is divine. Xiaochen did not know what it meant. Seeing that Xiaochen was frowning in deep in thought, Qin Feng continued. Your current realm should be having the sword in the heart, but you have not reached the state of having no sword in the heart. Senior, please enlighten me. Hearing this, Xiaochen cupped his hands and bowed. He did not feel that it was a shameful thing to ask Qin Feng for advice. After all, Qin Feng was stronger than him. Moreover, Xiaochen did not have a sword in the heart. If a sword cultivator did not have a sword in the heart, then what was he cultivating? Hearing Xiaochen's words, Qin Feng threw the sword in his hand to the side and said slowly, having no sword in the heart is not giving up, but having no self. Only by having no self can one reach the peak and comprehend the true essence of swordsmanship. Following Qin Feng's words, Xiaochen could clearly feel that there was no longer any sword aura around Qin Feng's body. It was as if he was not a sword cultivator at all. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the originally calm surface of the lake seemed to have been cut by a sword. The entire lake was instantly split into two. Seeing this scene, Xiaochen was stunned. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 2439. The surface of the lake wasn't very big, yet it had been directly split into two. The sword aura didn't give off a sharp feeling, but it was precisely because of this that it made people shudder even more. A heavy sword without a sharp edge. It was not that Qin Feng's sword qi did not have a sharp edge, but it gave off a feeling that it had been washed clean. Its sharpness was restrained and its power was even stronger. Time slowly passed and the lake returned to its calm state. At this time, Qin Feng looked at Xiao Chen and said without a change in his expression. As I said before, your talent is not bad, but perhaps because of the problem of the cultivation environment, you have reached a bottleneck. If you do not have a great opportunity, it will be difficult for you to break through. Let me give you a suggestion. Stay in the Cloud Palace in the Hongmeng world. It will not be too long, at most 3 years. You will not regret the result. After saying this, Qin Feng did not wait for Xiao Chen to reply and immediately left. Qin Feng did not lie about Xiao Chen's talent. This trip to let Xiao Chen temporarily stay in the Cloud Palace and the Hongmeng world was Qin Feng's sincere suggestion. In Qin Feng's eyes, it was not difficult to see that Xiao Chen was a piece of unpolished jade. In terms of talent, Xiao Chen was above Qin Feng. But why was Xiao Chen's cultivation still only at the half-step emperor realm? To put it bluntly, it was because of the cultivation environment. Thinking about it, the strongest in the Great Thousand World were only the 2 half-step ancestor realm masters, Junwuya and Xia Tian. To be honest, Junwuya and Xia Tian's half-step ancestor realm masters had more to do with luck. This was because the Great Thousand World did not have any records of those above the Emperor realm. Throughout history, the strongest in the Great Thousand World had always been at the Emperor realm. In this way, to a certain extent, the Great Thousand World had limited Xiao Chen's progress. Now, Xiao Chen felt as if he had reached the peak of the Great Thousand World and there was an insurmountable mountain in front of him. If he wanted to climb this mountain, Xiao Chen would have to pay a great price. One had to fumble about on their own, try things out on their own. This way, it was hard to avoid taking many detours. However, in the primordial world, Cloud Palace, and Immortal Palace, there was no such problem at all. This was because regardless of whether it was the Cloud Palace or the Immortal Palace, they both had perfect cultivation systems. Compared to the Great Thousand World, if Xiao Chen stayed in the Cloud Palace, he would definitely obtain more. Furthermore, the speed of his improvement would obviously be faster. Of course, Qin Feng said this only because he thought that Xiao Chen was a good person. He didn't want a bright pearl to be covered in dust. As for the final decision, it still depended on what the Palace Lord thought. If the Palace Lord of the Cloud Palace wasn't willing, then Xiao Chen obviously couldn't do anything. However, Qin Feng's words before he left had planted a seed in Xiao Chen's heart. In the beginning, the reason why he was in a hurry to return to the Great Thousand World was because he was afraid of the situation there. After all, the battle between the good and evil was not over yet. However, on the other hand, with his current cultivation, what could he do even if he returned to the Great Thousand World? He still couldn't control the development of the Great Thousand World, but what if Xiao Chen broke through to the Ancestor Realm? If he returned to the Great Thousand World with his Ancestor Realm cultivation, he would be an invincible existence in the entire Great Thousand World. However, it was especially easy to step into the Ancestor Realm. Junwuya and Xia Tian had been stuck at the half-step Ancestor Realm for so many years, but they still hadn't really stepped into the Ancestor Realm. On one hand, he was worried about the situation in the Great Thousand World, worried about his parents, Qin Shuru, 100 Flower Fairy, and the children, but on the other hand, Xiao Chen had to admit that Qin Feng's words had moved him. With complicated feelings, Xiao Chen returned to his residence. When Xiao Chen returned, Xian Yuanling and Long Qing, who had finished their cultivation, were already waiting for him. In the courtyard, seeing Xiao Chen walking over with a pensive expression, Long Qing couldn't help but ask, "Little brother, what's wrong with you? You look like you have something on your mind." "Big brother, second sister, do you think that we've made the right choice to return to the Great Thousand World in a hurry?" Xiao Chen asked softly. He told the two of them about his encounter with Qin Feng. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Xian Yuanling and Long Qing obviously knew what Xiao Chen was thinking. The three of them sat together, and Xian Yuanling said after a long silence, third brother, are you worried about the current situation in the Great Thousand World? Yes. Actually, I think you're thinking too much, third brother. We've launched a surprise attack on the evil god palace, and now Leaping Tiger City has been successfully captured by the sovereigns. With Leaping Tiger City and Mausoleum City in our hands, our Great Thousand World has taken the initiative in the entire war. Although I don't dare to say that we can destroy the evil god palace, at least we can protect ourselves. As long as we can take control of Leaping Tiger City and Mausoleum City, the evil god palace can only hole up in the Hetian prefecture. Xian Yuanling said indifferently. Hearing this, Xiaochen fell into deep thought. Indeed, Xian Yuanling's words were not without reason. With Leaping Tiger City and Mausoleum City in their hands, the Great Thousand World had taken the initiative in the war. At least, there was no problem in maintaining a stalemate. Moreover, if they did not take down Leaping Tiger City and Mausoleum City, the evil god palace would not be able to rush out of the Hetian prefecture, nor would they be able to pose a threat to the rest of the Great Thousand World. Seeing that Xiaochen had fallen into deep thought, Xian Yuanling paused for a moment, then continued, so third brother's worries are unnecessary. On the contrary, I think that Qin Feng is right. After all, this is a great opportunity for us. If we can improve our strength, when we return to the Great Thousand World, we can make the final decision and completely end the war between the good and evil. From what Xian Yuanling said, he agreed with Qin Feng's suggestion. Hearing this, Xiaochen did not answer, but he also did not object. It was a silent night. Throughout the night, Xiaochen had been thinking about this matter. Should he return to the Great Thousand World immediately or stay in the Cloud Palace? After a night, Xiaochen finally made a decision. When the next morning came, the monk really came. He strode into the courtyard, and when he saw Xiaochen, he immediately laughed loudly. "Ha, brother Xiaochen, the matter has been settled. The palace master wants to see you now." The monk's words clearly meant that the palace master of the Cloud Palace had agreed to his request to help him return to the Great Thousand World. Hearing this, Xiaochen also got up and bowed to the monk. "Thank you, master, but I still have something to discuss with you." Then, Xiaochen truthfully told the monk about his encounter with Qin Feng by the lake last night, as well as what Qin Feng said to him. In the end, Xiaochen said with a serious expression, "Although I know that saying this is a bit too whimsical, after all, I am not a disciple of the Cloud Palace, but if possible, I still hope to stay in the Cloud Palace to cultivate and improve my strength." In front of the monk, Xiaochen did not have any hypocrisy. After all, in front of an ancestor like the monk, those boring twists and turns were obviously meaningless. It was better to directly say what was in his heart. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2440. Xiaochen said without hiding anything. Upon hearing this, Tyrant did not look too surprised. Instead, he smiled and said, "That's right, Qin Feng is right. After all, this is indeed a great opportunity for brother Xiaochen." Xiaochen said without hiding anything. Upon hearing this, Tyrant did not look too surprised. Instead, he smiled and said, "That's right, Qin Feng is right. After all, this is indeed a great opportunity for brother Xiaochen." Tyrant did not have the slightest intention of blaming Qin Feng. However, after saying this, Tyrant paused and looked at Xiaochen. He said slowly, "However, this is not something that I can decide. It depends on what my palace master says." Xiaochen wanted to stay in the Cloud Palace to cultivate. As such, he naturally needed the cultivation resources of the Cloud Palace. However, if he wanted to use the cultivation resources of the Cloud Palace, he would have to ask for the palace master's permission. Upon hearing Tyrant's words, Xiaochen nodded and said, "Of course. Then follow me. The palace master is already waiting for you." Tyrant got up and said with a smile. After speaking to Gu Lingyao and the other two girls, Xiaochen left alone with Tyrant. This was the first time that Xiaochen had met the palace master of the Cloud Palace. He was curious about what kind of person the so-called world master was. Xiaochen already knew from Tyrant that the World Master was an existence that surpassed the ancestor state. He was the strongest person and a part of the universe. Xiaochen had seen Tyrant's strength with his own eyes. He was definitely an existence that could destroy the world. With Tyrant's strength, he alone was enough to cause the Great Thousand World to fall into a crisis of destruction. Xiaochen was naturally curious about the Palace Master of the Cloud Palace, who was even stronger than Tyrant. Under Tyrant's lead, Xiaochen came to the depths of the Cloud Palace without any obstructions. Through the entrance of a small world, Xiaochen came to the place where the Palace Master of the Cloud Palace lived. It was a very simple small world, but the scenery was beautiful. Moreover, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was rich to a terrifying extent. There was a drizzle in the sky, but this drizzle was not ordinary rain. It was water droplets condensed from spiritual chi. Compared to the outside world, the spirit chi in this small world was several times richer. Aside from the spirit chi spring, Xiaochen had never seen another place with such rich spirit chi in this world. The air was filled with a faint fragrance. Following behind the monk, Xiaochen soon arrived outside a simple thatched hut. At this moment, a young man in a green robe was brewing tea in the open space outside the house. He was extraordinarily handsome, and his every move gave off a comfortable feeling like a spring breeze. Sensing the arrival of the monk and the young man lifted his head and looked over. When he saw the monk, the young man smiled and said, "You're here." As he spoke, his gaze shifted from the monk to Xiaochen. He did not reveal any aura, and because of the faint smile on the young man's face, Xiaochen even felt a sense of familiarity. In fact, in terms of appearance, Xiaochen did not belong to the young man in front of him. Today, Xiaochen was dressed in a snow-white robe. His eyebrows were sharp and his eyes were bright. He was also extraordinarily handsome, but compared to the young man, Xiaochen lacked a different aura. He did not have the slightest bit of arrogance. The young man merely sized up Xiaochen, then smiled and said, "Have a seat." Hearing this, the monk did not stand on ceremony. He sat down beside the young man and said to the young man with a playful smile, "This is Brother Xiaochen that I mentioned yesterday." As he spoke, the monk said to Xiaochen, "Brother Xiaochen, this is my palace master, Lin Yun. Junior Xiaochen greets senior." Hearing this, Xiaochen also cupped his hands and bowed. From the beginning to the end, Lin Yun did not give Xiaochen any pressure. However, Xiaochen did not have the slightest contempt because of this. On the contrary, because of the refreshing feeling that Lin Yun gave off, Xiaochen became more and more curious and fearful of Lin Yun. Lin Yun seemed to be about the same age as him, but Xiaochen felt a kind of aura from Lin Yun that he had never seen before. It was as if she was born to make people have a good impression of her. In the face of Xiaochen's greeting, Lin Yun smiled and waved her hand nonchalantly. "Sit." After taking a seat, Lin Yun personally made a cup of tea for Xiaochen, then asked with a smile, "I heard from the monk that you came from a universe called the Great Thousand World." "That's right." "That's interesting. Can you tell me about the situation of the Great Thousand World?" Lin Yun was also very curious about the Great Thousand World. After all, it was a universe that she had never understood. In this regard, Xiaochen did not hide anything and truthfully told Lin Yun about the situation of the Great Thousand World. He was not worried that Lin Yun had any evil intentions towards the Great Thousand World. After all, with Lin Yun's cultivation realm and strength, if he really wanted to harm the Great Thousand World, then it did not matter whether Xiaochen said it or not, Lin Yun would not have anything to do with it. Moreover, Lin Yun seemed to have a kind of magical power that would involuntarily make people willing to believe him and take the initiative to get close to him. The three of them drank tea while Xiaochen talked about what he had heard about the Great Thousand World. After listening to Xiaochen's story, Lin Yun slowly said, "In that case, the Great Thousand World has yet to have a world lord?" "Yes." Hearing this, Xiaochen nodded and replied. A universe without a world lord, and the martial arts civilization of the Great Thousand Worlds seemed to have only developed to the level of the Emperor realm. The strongest person was only at the half-step ancestor realm, and it was only by chance that they took this half-step. For a moment, Lin Yun had some understanding of the Great Thousand World. It seemed that the strength of this universe should not be strong, at least far inferior to the Hongmeng world and the Great World. He learned a lot about the Great Thousand World from Xiaochen. At the same time, a young woman appeared in front of the three of them. Her appearance was unparalleled, comparable to Qin Shuru and Baihua Fairy. As soon as the woman appeared, she smiled and said to Lin Yun, "Husband. Bing Ning, you're back." Hearing this, Lin Yun also responded with a smile. The woman's name was Lu Bing Ning, and she was one of Lin Yun's wives. Under the monk's introduction, Xiaochen also bowed to Lu Bing Ning. His eyes were clear, and he did not look at Lu Bing Ning too much. After all, she was his wife, and Xiaochen still knew this etiquette. After introducing each other, Lu Bing Ning looked at Lin Yun, and seemed to want to say something but hesitated. Seeing this, Lin Yun asked with a smile. "What's wrong? Is there something that you can't tell me?" Hearing Xiaochen's words, Lu Bing Ning said with a helpless expression, "Feng'er killed a palace lord of a mortal palace, and he is still in a mortal palace. It is said that the palace lord of a mortal palace is furious. Sister Lan Shi and the others have already rushed over." Hearing Lu Bing Ning's words, Lin Yun was slightly taken aback, but soon he laughed and said, "This kid is getting more and more lawless. Please collect, please vote, please recommend." Chapter 2441. Originally, Xiaochen planned to tell Lin Yun that he wanted to stay in the Cloud Palace to cultivate. He hoped that Lin Yun would agree. However, before he could say anything, such a thing happened. Immortal Palace had 10 Great Hall Masters. Their status was the same as the 10 sword maniacs of the Sword Sect. They were the real outstanding talents among all the disciples. Their status was very high. Moreover, the 10 Great Hall Masters of Immortal Palace were all disciples of the Palace Master of Immortal Palace. As a result, their status was even higher. A Palace Hall disciple had been killed. For the Celestial Palace, this was a huge matter, but the person who killed him was not simple either. It could even be said that the person who killed him was not inferior to the 10 Palace Hall disciples because the person who killed him was called Lin Feng, Lin Yun's only son. Lin Yun had a son and a daughter. The son's name was Lin Feng, and the daughter's name was Lin Shui. Lin Feng was the one who killed the Great Hall Master of Immortal Palace. It was no wonder that Lu Bing Ning personally came to ask Lin Yun to come forward. After all, the trouble Lin Feng caused this time was not small. Lin Yun definitely had to come forward. But from Lin Yun's expression, she didn't seem to take it to heart. If someone else had killed a Great Hall Master of Immortal Palace, they would have panicked and their expressions would have changed greatly. However, Lin Yun still had a gentle smile on her face. There was no change in her expression at all. In the eyes of others, it was a major event. However, for Lin Yun, it was nothing. This came from her confidence in her own strength. Because of this confidence, Lin Yun didn't feel nervous at all. After saying that, Lin Yun turned to look at Xiaochen and said with an apologetic smile, "Xiaochen, I originally planned to drink with you today. Now it seems that I have to postpone it." Upon hearing Lin Yun's words, Xiaochen also replied with a smile, "Palace Master Lin, you're exaggerating. There will be plenty of time for drinking wine in the future. However, if Palace Master Lin doesn't mind, I would like to do my part for today's matter." Lin Feng had killed the Celestial Palace's young master. That could be a big or small thing. Of course, the final result depended on Lin Yun and the Celestial Palace's leader. But at that moment, Xiaochen had to make his position clear. He was willing to go with Lin Yun, which meant that Xiaochen was willing to stand with Yun Palace. With Xiaochen's current level of cultivation, he couldn't influence much at all. He couldn't even influence the battle between the righteous and evil, let alone the Cloud Palace and the Immortals' Hall. However, Xiaochen only said this to express his attitude. After hearing Xiaochen's words, Lu Bingning also looked at Xiaochen curiously. Looking at this young man who was as handsome as her husband, Lu Bingning was curious. Is he the person from the Great Thousand World that my husband mentioned? Obviously, Lu Bingning had also heard about Xiaochen and the Great Thousand World. Lu Bingning was also very curious about this universe that she had never been to or even heard of. Lu Bingning looked at Xiao Chen curiously. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Lin Yun didn't hesitate and said with a smile, "That's good. Xiao Chen, come with me to the Immortals Hall." She didn't refuse Xiao Chen. Of course, Lin Yun didn't think that Xiao Chen could help. In Lin Yun's opinion, it was also good to let Xiao Chen get in touch with the Immortals Hall. Moreover, she didn't know how to put it. When facing Xiao Chen, Lin Yun always felt like she saw her old self in him. This feeling was very strange, but also very interesting. Immediately, the three of them rushed directly to the Immortals Hall. The monk wanted to go with them, but Lin Yun didn't hesitate to refuse because of the temperament of the monk. If one were to ask who among the 9 palace masters of the Cloud Palace was the most troublesome, everyone would say without hesitation, the monk from the Buddha Palace, the Taoist from the Tao Palace, Lu Tao from the Medicine Palace, and Guan Renjia from the Weapon Palace. These 4 guys were definitely troublemakers, so Lin Yun rejected the monk without hesitation. This made the monk, who was originally looking forward to it, instantly deflate. With Xiao Chen, the 3 of them quickly arrived at the Cloud Palace. Along the way, Xiao Chen was also surprised by Lu Bingning's cultivation. This woman, who didn't look inferior to Qin Shuru and the other women, was also an Ancestor Realm expert. This was something that Xiao Chen didn't expect. However, since she could become Lin Yun's wife, it couldn't be purely because of her good looks. Lin Yun, Lu Bingning, and Xiao Chen directly landed in front of the main hall of the Immortals Hall. At a glance, they saw the 5 beautiful women and the 2 young men and women who were surrounded by many Immortals Hall experts. The 7 of them were surrounded by many Immortals Hall experts. At the same time, the Immortals Hall experts were all furious, and some of them even revealed killing intent in their eyes. In response, the smile on Lin Yun's face slowly disappeared. She gently swung her sleeve, and instantly, a terrifying force erupted. Without any resistance, the Immortals Hall experts were directly sent flying. Even a few Ancestor Realm experts couldn't resist Lin Yun's force. The strength of a World Lord was far stronger than an Ancestor Realm expert. After easily repelling everyone, Lin Yun, accompanied by Lu Bingning, strode to the front of the 7 people. Then, she said with an indifferent expression, "Mu Ling Xian, come out and have a chat." Lin Yun wasn't in the mood to pay attention to these Immortals Hall experts. It was very simple. They weren't qualified to talk to Lin Yun, let alone negotiate. Lin Yun looked at her only son, Ling Feng, and slapped Lin Feng's head. Lin Yun scolded angrily, "Boy, you're getting more and more lawless. Let's see how I'll deal with you when we get back." "Dad, you can't blame me for this. They asked for it." Hearing this, Lin Feng looked at Lin Yun with a rebellious face and said. Hearing Lin Feng's words, Lin Yun's eyebrows twitched. This brat dared to talk back. Lin Yun was about to hit him again, but a beautiful woman on the side protected Lin Feng first, and then whispered, "How can you talk to your father like that?" Saying that, the woman pulled Lin Feng behind her. It seemed that she was reprimanding Lin Feng, but in fact, it was completely to protect him. In the face of the woman's action, Lin Yun was stunned, and then sighed helplessly. This boy was completely spoiled by his mothers. It was as if he didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Looking at the conversation between Lin Yun and Lin Feng, Xiao Chen naturally didn't interrupt. This time, he came as an invisible person, but Lu Bingning took the initiative to introduce the identities of several people to Xiao Chen. The young man and woman were naturally Xiao Chen's children. The man's name was Lin Feng, and the woman's name was Lin Shui. The other 5 beautiful women were the other 5 wives of Lin Yun, namely Lan Shi, Mo Qing Lu, Shi Jin, Ren Ting, and Qin Zhu. Please collect, monthly vote, recommend. Chapter 2442. After knowing the identities of Lan Shi and the others, as well as Lin Feng and Lin Shui, Xiao Chen didn't say much. After all, with his cultivation level, he obviously didn't have much say at this time. Xiao Chen knew that. After knowing the identities of Lan Shi and the others, as well as Lin Feng and Lin Shui, Xiaochen didn't say much. After all, with his cultivation level, he obviously didn't have much say at this time. Xiaochen knew that. At the same time, while Lin Yun was teaching Lin Yun a lesson, a young man slowly walked out of the main hall. He was wearing a purple gold robe and looked at Lin Yun with a smile on his face. "Brother Lin Yun, you're a rare guest." The young man was Mu Ling Xian, the leader of the Immortal Palace and also the world master of the Hongmeng world. He didn't show up before because Lin Yun didn't show up. Mu Ling Xian didn't have much to say to Lan Shi and the others. Mu Ling Xian showed up and exchanged a few words with Lin Yun. Then, everyone entered the main hall. Mu Ling Xian didn't look at Xiaochen from the beginning to the end. Mu Ling Xian naturally knew Xiaochen's identity. After all, in the Hongmeng world, there weren't many things that could be hidden from Mu Ling Xian. Moreover, the two strong cultivators of the Immortal Palace had already seen Xiaochen in Lin country. However, with Xiaochen's cultivation level, it was obviously not enough for Mu Ling Xian to pay attention to him. After entering the main hall, Mu Ling Xian and Lin Yun took their seats. Mu Ling Xian looked at Xiaochen standing behind Lin Yun and said with a smile, "Are you from the Great Thousand World?" "Yes, Xiaochen, this is the leader of the Immortal Palace, Mu Ling Xian," Lin Yun said and introduced Mu Ling Xian to Xiaochen. In response, Xiaochen cupped his hands together and bowed. On the other hand, Mu Ling Xian sized up Xiaochen curiously and nodded without saying anything. She shifted her gaze to Lin Yun again and spoke slowly. "Brother Lin Yun, you should know my identity as Immortal Palace's palace child." Lin Feng had killed a member of the Celestial Palace, so Mu Ling Xian didn't beat around the bush. When Lin Feng heard Mu Ling Xian, he was annoyed, but he didn't dare say anything. Lin Yun said indifferently, "Of course, but I'm more curious about the cause of this matter." Lin Feng had killed a member of the Celestial Palace, that was a fact, but Lin Feng couldn't have killed a member of the Celestial Palace for no reason. Asked Lin Yun to Lin Feng without waiting for Mu Ling Xian to reply. "Fenger, tell me, why did you kill that prince?" Lin Yun didn't give Mu Ling Xian a chance to refuse. When Lin Feng heard Mu Ling Xian's words, he told her the truth. In fact, the matter wasn't complicated. A few days ago, Lin Feng and Lin Shui went out, but they met the palace child and a few disciples of the Celestial Palace. At the beginning, that Celestial Palace disciple had provoked Lin Feng, but Lin Feng had ignored him. In the end, that disciple had even insulted the Yun Palace. Lin Feng couldn't tolerate that. They had a conflict, and Lin Feng had immediately killed that Celestial Palace disciple. After listening to Lin Feng's story, Lin Yun still had a smile on her face and said to Mu Ling Xian, "Brother Mu, how is it? Did you hear what happened?" Lin Feng didn't kill people for no reason. That Celestial Palace disciple had provoked him and humiliated the Yun Palace. Therefore, Lin Feng had to kill him. It was reasonable. However, in the face of Lin Yun's question, Mu Ling Xian's expression didn't change. "No matter what, my palace child was killed by your son. You have to give me an explanation." The cause of the matter was a quarrel. Both sides were in the wrong, but Lin Feng killed him. Mu Ling Xian couldn't just let it go. After all, Mu Ling Xian also wanted to save face. His palace child was killed. As the palace leader and teacher, if Mu Ling Xian didn't say anything, people would think that the palace child was afraid of the Yun Palace. Mu Ling Xian definitely wanted Lin Yun to give an explanation. Lin Yun wasn't surprised. She still smiled at Mu Ling Xian. Lin Yun said indifferently, "What explanation do you want?" If Mu Ling Xian wanted Lin Yun to hand over Lin Feng, that would be impossible. If Mu Ling Xian wanted Lin Yun to give him some compensation, Lin Yun would agree. But Mu Ling Xian probably didn't need that because Celestial Palace didn't lack cultivation resources. Mu Ling Xian looked at Lin Yun. He really didn't want any compensation because the palace child didn't lack it. The two looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Mu Ling Xian said, "My palace child has a rule. Anyone who violates the rules will be triggered. However, there is a path of immortals and demons. As long as you can walk through it, you can avoid being triggered. Let Lin Feng go to the path of immortals and demons. If he can walk through it, I won't pursue this matter. Immortal Palace did have such a rule, but the path of immortals and demons was extremely dangerous. Even if an Emperor Realm cultivator entered, there was a 90% chance of death. Lin Feng was only an End Realm cultivator. If he entered the path of immortals and demons, he would definitely die. Mu Ling Xian's request was to give himself a way out. Lin Feng had killed someone, a member of the Celestial Shrine. Therefore, according to the rules of the Celestial Shrine, they couldn't let Lin Feng off. However, if Lin Feng entered the Celestial and Demon Road, Gu Lingyao would have a reason not to pursue the matter and nobody would say anything. However, after hearing Mu Ling Xian's words, Lin Yun refused without thinking. Impossible. Lin Yun had also heard of the dangers of the path of immortals and demons. It could be said that the path of immortals and demons was specially used to punish those who violated the rules of Immortal Palace. No matter what kind of crime, as long as one entered the path of immortals and demons, regardless of life or death, it would be written off. If one died inside, then there was no need to talk about it. If one could come out alive, then their previous crimes would be forgotten. However, for so many years, there seemed to be no one who could pass through the path of immortals and demons alive. Those who entered the path of immortals and demons basically died inside. There was no one who could safely leave the path of immortals and demons. Therefore, in the face of Mu Ling Xian's request, Lin Yun refused without thinking. Letting Lin Feng enter the path of immortals and demons was absolutely impossible. Seeing Lin Yun refuse, Mu Ling Xian's eyes flashed with a touch of coldness, and his tone gradually became colder. Brother Lin Yun, so you don't intend to give me an explanation? It's not that I don't want to give you an explanation, but I, Lin Yun, can't afford to give you an explanation, and I don't want to give you one. Hearing this, Lin Yun also replied, not to be outdone. Looking at the gradually rising coldness around the two, Lu Bingning and the other girls beside Lin Yun all showed a wry smile, and Lan Shi whispered in a low voice. As expected, the girls were very clear about Lin Yun's character. She was a person who could be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. Mu Ling Xian was so aggressive, with Lin Yun's character, it was naturally impossible for her to make the slightest concession. Even if there was an all-out war with Immortal Palace, Lin Yun would not make the slightest concession. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 2443. As Lin Yun's wives, Lu Bingning and the other women naturally understood their husband's character. Since they were young, Lin Yun was not a person who would admit defeat. In fact, Lin Yun was the same as Xiao Chen. They were both people who came from a small place in the great world. As the first woman Lin Yun met, Lu Bingning was very clear that when Lin Yun was at the Iron Gate Pass in the Yanhuang country, the young Lin Yun's character was already extremely unyielding. After so many years, Lin Yun might have changed a lot. She had matured and become more stable, but the arrogance in her bones had not changed at all. Although Mu Ling Xian was the world lord of the Hongmeng world and had the same status as Lin Yun, it was absolutely impossible for Mu Ling Xian to make Lin Yun bow her head. Not to mention, Mu Ling Xian wanted Lin Yun to send her only son into the Immortal Demon Road. This was even more whimsical. If Mu Ling Xian only wanted some compensation, and then both sides would have a way out, perhaps Lin Yun would agree. However, this was not what Mu Ling Xian wanted. Lu Bingning and the other women smiled bitterly, as if they already knew what was going to happen next. Xiao Chen was silent. This level of confrontation was not something that Xiao Chen could intervene in. After hearing Lin Yun's straightforward rejection, Mu Ling Xian, who was sitting on the main seat, looked at Lin Yun and said coldly, Lin Yun, this is the Hongmeng world, not your great world. My Immortal Palace is not someone who can be bullied as you wish. Hearing Mu Ling Xian's words, Lin Yun sneered and slowly stood up. Then, a towering aura erupted from her body. Almost instantly, the main hall was overturned by Lin Yun's aura. Outside the palace, there were still quite a few experts from Immortal Palace gathered. They weren't prepared at all, and the palace was directly shattered by a wave of terrifying aura. As the Great Hall shattered, Lin Yun, Mu Lingxian and the others' figures appeared in the crowd's mouths. At this moment, the experts of the Immortal Palace also saw Lin Yun, who was dressed in green clothes and standing proudly, as well as their palace master, who was sitting on the main seat with an extremely ugly expression. But before anyone could recover from their shock, Lin Yun's cold voice had already shocked everyone. Mu Lingxian, if you want an explanation, I'll give it to you. Cloud Palace disciples, listen up. Today, this one is going to wipe out Immortal Palace. Lin Yun's voice clearly spread throughout the entire Immortal Palace. Of course, it also reached the Cloud Palace and Immortal Palace. At every corner of Immortal Palace, many disciples heard Lin Yun's words and were all stunned. What was going on? Someone wanted to destroy Immortal Palace? Was this a joke? As the only overlord of the primordial world, who dared to go against Immortal Palace, let alone destroy Immortal Palace? This was simply a joke. However, unlike the ordinary disciples, the elders and core disciples of Immortal Palace knew what was going on and also knew who said those words just now. At this moment, in a cave in Immortal Palace, two middle-aged men were sitting opposite each other. After hearing Lin Yun's words, one of them revealed a bitter smile and said, "It seems like the negotiations have broken down. Sai, let's go. Today, we can't avoid a battle with those lunatics from Cloud Palace." Hearing this, the other person smiled helplessly. These two people were one of the 9 palace masters of Immortal Palace. Like Cloud Palace, the 9 palace masters of Immortal Palace were also Ancestor Realm experts. Their strength wasn't any weaker than the 9 palace masters of Cloud Palace. The experts of Immortal Palace hurried towards the Great Hall. At the same time, in Cloud Palace, many disciples of Cloud Palace rushed into the sky one by one after hearing Lin Yun's words. Perhaps some of them didn't know what was going on, but since their palace master said to destroy Immortal Palace, then they must destroy Immortal Palace. This was the thought of many disciples of Cloud Palace. They believed in their palace master, so in their hearts, they only needed to carry out their palace master's orders. Inside the cave, the monk and the Taoist stood up with smiles on their faces. A wretched smile hung on their faces as they patted their fat tummies and said with a wretched look on their faces, "It seems like Mu Lingxian has really angered the palace master. Interesting, interesting." Monk and Taoist didn't mind watching a show. In Qin Feng's cave, after hearing this, Qin Feng didn't say a word. He stood up, took his sword, and disappeared. In Medicine Palace, 3 young men also stood up after hearing Lin Yun's words. These 3 people were Lu Tao, Guan Renjia, and Li Tian. They were the palace masters of Medicine Palace, Weapon Palace, and Array Palace. Among them, Lu Tao was the palace master of Medicine Palace. Lin Yun was his brother-in-law and his sister was Lu Bingning. "Let's go." Li Tian, the palace master of Array Palace, took the lead and disappeared. 8 Palace was the undisputed #1 palace in Cloud 9 palaces. As the palace master, Lin Yuan was not only recognized as the strongest among the palace masters, but also because he was Lin Yun's sworn brother. At this moment, after hearing Lin Yun's order, an elder of 8 Palace had a slight change in expression. He looked at Lin Yuan and said, "Palace master, this." Clearly, this elder was frightened by Lin Yun's words. What a joke! Cloud Palace was indeed powerful, but Immortal Palace wasn't a pushover either. As an overlord of a universe, Immortal Palace was completely capable of fighting against Cloud Palace. Why did their palace master directly give the order to destroy Immortal Palace after making a trip to Immortal Palace? Moreover, this was the primordial world, their territory. Cloud Palace wouldn't gain any advantage if they fought. The best result would be both sides suffering. He looked at Lin Yuan worriedly. However, in response to this, a young man with a sturdy body and naked body stood up and said indifferently, Big Brother said to destroy Immortal Palace. Then let's do it. As soon as his voice fell, the sturdy young man disappeared. This person was Lin Yuan, the #1 palace master of Cloud 9 palaces. He was Lin Yun's sworn brother. Not only the people of Immortal Palace, but Xian Yuanling and Long Qing, who were also in Cloud Palace, also heard Lin Yun's words. However, they were naturally not concerned about Lin Yun, but about Xiao Chen. After looking at each other, Long Qing said, "Don't tell me little brother is also in Immortal Palace?" Early in the morning, Xiao Chen went to visit Cloud Palace Palace Master Lin Yun. Long Qing and Xian Yuanling knew about this. However, now that Lin Yun was in Immortal Palace, where was Xiao Chen? Could it be that he was also with Lin Yun? After hearing Long Qing's words, Xian Yuanling didn't hesitate too much and said solemnly, "Let's go too." Although they knew that with their strength, they wouldn't be able to change anything even if they went. If Xiao Chen was in Immortal Palace, Long Qing and Xian Yuanling naturally wouldn't sit idly by. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2444. Long Qing and Xian Yuanling were worried about Xiao Chen's safety. At the same time, Gu Lingyao, Li Ku, and the other End Realm experts from the Great Thousand Worlds strode into the courtyard. Gu Lingyao shouted, "Is my husband in Immortal Palace now?" Gu Lingyao and the others knew that Xiao Chen had gone to visit Lin Yun. Now that something like this had happened, everyone naturally thought that Xiao Chen should be in Immortal Palace. Hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Xian Yuanling said straightforwardly, "Let's go too." Hearing Xian Yuanling's words, no one said anything. In a flash, they rushed towards Immortal Palace. Although their cultivations couldn't change anything in front of Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace, Xiao Chen might be in danger. Naturally, they couldn't just stand by and watch. Above Immortal Palace's main hall, experts from Cloud Palace and Immortal Palace kept rushing over. First, a few palace masters of Immortal Palace appeared. Then, Lin Yuan and the other palace masters of Cloud Palace appeared one after another. Above the main hall, the 9 palace masters of Immortal Palace and the 9 palace masters of Cloud Palace stood facing each other. In terms of numbers, Immortal Palace definitely had more people. At this moment, there were disciples of Immortal Palace everywhere. After all, as the only overlord of the Hongmeng world, Immortal Palace claimed to have millions of disciples. It could be said that the people of Cloud Palace were completely surrounded. However, the people of Cloud Palace didn't change their expressions at all. It was as if they didn't realize that they were surrounded. As the #1 palace master of the 9 palace masters, Lin Yuan naturally wouldn't be surrounded by everyone. At the same time, Lin Yuan also looked at a middle-aged man standing at the front of the 9 palace masters of Immortal Palace. This person was called Gong Nantian. He was the #1 palace master of Immortal Palace. Like Lin Yuan, he was known as the strongest among the 9 palace masters of Immortal Palace. His strength was second only to Mu Lingxian. It wasn't the first time that he had met Gong Nantian. The two of them had even drunk together and sparred with each other. However, at this moment, Lin Yuan looked at Gong Nantian with a trace of hostility. Although he had a good impression of Gong Nantian and the two of them could be said to be friends who didn't know each other well, with Lin Yuan's character, this was nothing. As long as Lin Yun wanted to destroy Immortal Palace, Lin Yuan wouldn't even frown. Gong Nantian also sensed the change in Lin Yuan. He sighed silently and then looked at Lin Yuan calmly and said, "Lin Yuan, and Lin Yuan's right." Gong Nantian's meaning was very simple. If Lin Yuan wanted to fight, then let's fight. After all, even a person made of clay had 3 points of fire. Immortal Palace wasn't afraid of Cloud Palace. However, everything still depended on the palace master's decision. After all, Lin Yun said that she wanted to destroy Immortal Palace. Mu Lingxian still hadn't responded. Just as Gong Nantian was speaking, in the hall below, Lin Yun looked indifferently at Mu Lingxian who was sitting on the main seat. Behind her, Lu Bingning and the other girls all smiled bitterly. It felt like they were saying, "See, I knew things would turn out like this. Thinking of this, Lu Bingming transmitted her voice to Xiaochen, young Master Xiao, don't get involved in this matter. If a fight breaks out, young Master Xiao can find a chance to leave. Lu Bingming was indeed kind. After all, Xiaochen's cultivation was useless if he stayed. Moreover, Xiaochen wasn't a member of Cloud Palace. There was no need for him to get involved. Hearing Lu Bingming's words, Xiaochen felt helpless. What was going on? Xiaochen didn't expect Lin Yun's temper to be so overbearing. Weren't they talking nicely just now? Why did she want to destroy them in the next second? Moreover, she didn't seem to be joking at all. Looking at Lin Yun's back, Xiaochen was a little confused. Lin Yun was indeed too overbearing. However, she had the right to be overbearing. However, this made Xiaochen suffer. Firstly, Xiaochen didn't want to offend Cloud Palace. After all, Cloud Palace had treated him well. Moreover, Lin Yun gave him a feeling of familiarity at first sight. She didn't look down on him because of his cultivation. Moreover, Xiaochen still wanted to stay in Cloud Palace to cultivate for a period of time. Cloud Palace had shown him kindness, and he had a favor to ask of Cloud Palace. No matter how one looked at it, Xiaochen should stand on Cloud Palace's side. However, there was still a problem that Xiaochen couldn't ignore. If he wanted to return to the Great Thousand World through the wormhole, he had to get the approval of Mu Lingxian, the World Lord of the Primordial World. Otherwise, Xiaochen wouldn't be able to return to the Great Thousand World. In this way, Xiaochen couldn't offend Immortal Palace. For a moment, Xiaochen cursed helplessly in his heart. What the hell was going on? On one hand, Cloud Palace had shown him kindness. On the other hand, Immortal Palace was related to whether or not he could return to the Great Thousand World. Now, he could only wait and see how Mu Lingxian would respond. Xiaochen only hoped that Mu Lingxian could calm down a little. Damn it, Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace were both overlords. If they fought, both sides wouldn't suffer losses. He hoped that Mu Lingxian could calm down a little. Calm down, calm down. If they fought, the disadvantages would outweigh the advantages. Mu Lingxian, as the Palace Lord of Immortal Palace, you must think of the bigger picture. You mustn't act on impulse. Xiaochen thought in his heart. He couldn't help but look at Mu Lingxian. After all, the direction of the situation now depended on Mu Lingxian's response. However, just as Xiaochen's gaze fell on Mu Lingxian stood up with an ashen face. He looked at Lin Yun with an equally cold gaze and said in an icy tone, "If you want to fight, then let's fight. My Immortal Palace doesn't fear anyone." Damn it. Xiaochen's expression changed when he heard Mu Lingxian's words. Was this guy brainless? Mu Lingxian actually chose to confront Lin Yun head-on. Xiaochen was speechless for a moment. He also didn't know what to do. Perhaps Xiaochen didn't expect that Mu Lingxian could become the world lord of the Hongmeng world and establish a powerful sect like Immortal Palace. How could Mu Lingxian be a person who would swallow humiliation? If Lin Yun's personality was domineering and could be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force, then Mu Lingxian was also such a person. Therefore, when Lin Yun said that she wanted to destroy Immortal Palace, it naturally infuriated Mu Lingxian. Of course, it wasn't only Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian. In fact, Xiaochen was also such a person. If someone dared to say that they wanted to destroy the Sword Sect, Xiaochen wouldn't be able to hold back and would just kill them. However, Xiaochen didn't have the mood to pay attention to this at all. Right now, Xiaochen was only thinking about how to resolve the upcoming battle between both sides. However, it was a pity that before Xiaochen could come up with a solution, Mu Lingxian's voice sounded again. Disciples of Immortal Palace, listen up. Destroy the Cloud Palace. Kill them all for me. Great. Even our palace master is angry. Upon hearing Mu Lingxian's order, Gong Mantian and the other 9 palace masters' eyes flashed with helplessness. However, they immediately looked at Lin Yuan and the other palace masters with unfriendly gazes. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2445. To be able to become the world lord of a universe, Mu Lingxian was naturally no pushover. Facing the overbearing Lin Yun, Mu Lingxian's choice was simple. If she wanted to fight, he would fight. To be able to become the world lord of a universe, Mu Lingxian was naturally no pushover. Facing the overbearing Lin Yun, Mu Lingxian's choice was simple. If she wanted to fight, he would fight. Following Mu Lingxian's words, the battle between the two sides completely erupted. Immediately, Gong Nantian, Lin Yuan and the other Ancestor Realm experts fought fiercely. At the same time, Lin Yun also took the initiative to attack. She looked at Mu Lingxian with a cold expression and threw out a punch. She said coldly, "I want to see how capable Immortal Palace is." Facing Lin Yun's attack, Mu Lingxian did not choose to dodge. Instead, he threw out a punch and collided head-on with Lin Yun's. Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian were both prideful people. Seeing the two of them fighting fiercely, Lu Bingning and the other women felt helpless. However, there was nothing they could do. Moreover, the disciples of Immortal Palace were also fighting fiercely with the people of Cloud Palace. In terms of numbers, Cloud Palace was definitely at a disadvantage. After all, this was the primordial world, their home ground. As for the Cloud Palace's side, they had traveled a long way from the Great World to this place, so they obviously couldn't bring all of their disciples with them. As a result, the Cloud Palace only had a few tens of thousands of people, completely incomparable to the Immortal Palace's million disciples. The only thing that had to be said was that Cloud Palace's disciples were all elites. However, Immortal Palace also had such genius disciples. Moreover, they had an overwhelming advantage in terms of numbers. Lu Bingning and the other women naturally had to take action. Otherwise, Cloud Palace's disciples would definitely suffer heavy casualties. Lu Bingning smiled and said to Xiaochen, "Young Master Xiao, find a chance to leave." As soon as she finished speaking, without waiting for Xiaochen's reply, Lu Bingning and the other women all took action and fought fiercely with Immortal Palace's experts. Looking at the terrifying power that erupted from Lu Bingning and the other women, Xiaochen was also stunned for a moment. Lin Yun's wives were not simple. Each of their cultivation had actually reached the Ancestor Realm. The entire Immortal Palace had become a battlefield. Both sides were fighting fiercely, especially Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian. The two of them were fighting fiercely. At this moment, Lin Yun was holding a long spear, while Mu Lingxian was holding a Vajra rod. The two of them could be said to be equally matched, and the might that surpassed the progenitor realm was fully unleashed. This was the first time he had seen the strength of a world lord. Even Xiaochen could not see their movements clearly. He could only see that the space where the two were fighting had completely collapsed, and the aftermath of the battle was constantly spreading out. An Ancestor Realm expert was already in existence that surpassed an Emperor Realm expert, and a world lord like Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian was in existence that surpassed an Ancestor Realm expert. In any universe, there was a limit to the laws of heaven and earth. That was, only one world lord could be born. Moreover, a universe that could give birth to a world lord must have a complete set of laws of heaven and earth without the slightest flaw. Otherwise, it would be impossible to become a world lord. Every world lord could be said to be in existence that stood above all living beings. Naturally, their strength could be imagined. In any case, Xiaochen could not see the movements of Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian at all, let alone intervene. As the battle continued, Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian's aura also continued to rise. Clearly, they were also fighting fiercely. Mu Lingxian's body was surrounded by countless immortal qi, while Lin Yun's battle aura was soaring to the sky, causing people to involuntarily feel a chill. A spear pierced out like a dragon, and a huge golden dragon went straight for Mu Lingxian. Seeing this, Mu Lingxian also slammed the Vajra staff in his hand down, ruthlessly hitting the golden dragon's head. For Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian, techniques such as absolute command and spatial movement were already very simple techniques. After successfully blocking Lin Yun's attack, Mu Lingxian pointed out his finger and softly shouted, "All-round Thunder Prison." As soon as his voice fell, the sky above the immortal palace was suddenly filled with dark clouds. Then, bolts of heavenly thunder fell from the sky and went straight for Xiaochen. With a single word, the laws of heaven and earth had to listen to my command. Facing the bombardment of countless heavenly thunder, Lin Yun had no intention of dodging at all. She allowed the heavenly thunder to continuously bombard her body, but Lin Yun was not injured at all. It was obviously impossible for a mere heavenly thunder to injure a world lord. Moreover, Lin Yun's body was obviously extremely strong and flawless like jade. She was not afraid of the heavenly thunder at all. Lin Yun didn't dodge and allowed the lightning to strike him. He looked at Mu Lingxian indifferently and sneered, "Mu Lingxian, have you had enough of these boring tricks? You, Lin Yun, don't push people too far." Hearing this, Mu Lingxian angrily shouted, "I'm pushing people too far? Mu Lingxian, you want me to enter the immortal demon road of your immortal palace alone? Who is pushing people too far? Humph, your son killed my prince. If he doesn't enter the immortal demon road, this matter is not over." In the face of Lin Yun's tyranny, Mu Lingxian did not give in. Today, if Lin Feng did not enter the immortal demon road, Mu Lingxian obviously would not give up. Hearing this, Lin Yun did not say anything more. She shook fiercely, and the heavenly thunder around her was directly shattered. At the same time, Lin Yun's body emitted the sound of a dragon. Then, in the 100,000 li of the sky where Lin Yun stretched out her hand, there were countless real dragon shadows. Countless golden dragons gathered behind Lin Yun. At this moment, Lin Yun was simply worshipping 10,000 dragons. When such a vision appeared, not to mention the people present, the warriors of the entire Hongmeng world were greatly shocked. Everywhere in the Hongmeng world, whether they had cultivation or not, everyone heard the roar of the king dragon. These dragon roars resounded through the world, causing all living beings to tremble in fear. Moreover, the primordial world's heavenly Tao laws also became berserk at this moment, as if they couldn't bear Lin Yun's might. Countless golden dragons entrenched behind Lin Yun, each of them opening their bloody mouths as if to swallow Mu Lingxian alive. Long Qing, who was rushing to the immortal palace, naturally saw this scene. Looking at the countless golden dragons in the sky, Long Qing said in disbelief, "How is this possible?" As a member of the Dragon Clan, Long Qing was naturally very sensitive to the aura of the Dragon Clan. From the countless golden dragons, Long Qing could feel the strong pressure of the ancestral dragon. In other words, the vision that erupted from Lin Yun, the countless golden dragons, each of them had the bloodline of the ancestral dragon. What kind of joke was this? One had to know that in the Great Thousand World, apart from the dead Long Yuan, only Long Qing had the bloodline of the ancestral dragon. Now, the countless golden dragons behind Lin Yun actually contained the bloodline of the ancestral dragon. What kind of means was this? Surrounded by 10,000 dragons, Mu Lingxian looked at Lin Yun in front of him, and his expression became more and more unsightly. "Please collect, please vote, please recommend." Chapter 2446. The countless golden dragons in the sky were naturally not real, but a vision caused by Lin Yun. The appearance of this vision also proved that Lin Yun was serious. Mu Lingxian looked at Lin Yun with an ugly expression. The anger in his heart continued to rise. Looking at Lin Yun's appearance, it was obvious that she wanted to fight to the death with him. Mu Lingxian said angrily, "All right, Lin Yun, if you want to fight, I'll accompany you to the end." As he spoke, Mu Lingxian's aura suddenly surged. In an instant, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. Rivers and seas roared. Behind Mu Lingxian, a vision was also born. A gorgeous rainbow light made the sky look magnificent. Without saying much, the two of them attacked at the same time. Lin Yun held a long sword in her hand and countless golden dragons followed behind her. On the other hand, Mu Lingxian's divine aura was overwhelming. The rainbow light seemed to cover the sky and earth. Hey, hey, hey! Are you serious? If this continues, this continent will be destroyed. Gong Nantian, who was fighting fiercely with Lin Yuan, was completely helpless when he saw Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian's actions. He could tell that his palace master and Lin Yun were completely serious. It was too easy for the battle between two world masters to destroy a continent. Not to mention a continent, the entire Hongmeng world would be severely damaged after this battle. Gong Nantian looked at Lin Yuan, who was fighting fiercely with him, and said helplessly, "Are you serious?" Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian's attacks were no longer a joke. Both of them were going all out. The situation seemed to be a little out of control. However, Lin Yuan had no intention of replying to Gong Nantian's words. In Lin Yuan's opinion, he would do whatever his elder brother said. As for the Hongmeng world, Lin Yuan was not in the mood to care. Seeing that Lin Yuan was completely unmoved, Gong Nantian was completely helpless. Why were the people of Yun Palace a bunch of stubborn people? Gong Nantian didn't seem to be willing to continue fighting. He had been like this from the beginning. This didn't mean that Gong Nantian was weaker than Lin Yuan. On the contrary, Gong Nantian was very strong. He had already reached the peak of the ancestor realm, and could be said to be on par with Lin Yuan. Gong Nantian was unwilling to continue fighting purely because he felt that it was troublesome. Moreover, it was meaningless. The people of Yun Palace was a bunch of stubborn people. His palace master was completely furious and did not care about the consequences. Gong Nantian could only helplessly deal with Lin Yuan's attacks. Gong Nantian was obviously complaining about Mu Lingxian. After all, compared to a prince, the Yun Palace was definitely more important. However, Gong Nantian also knew that Mu Lingxian was not angry because of the palace master. She was angry because of her own face. Lin Yun's domineering behavior made Mu Lingxian feel that she had lost her face. Therefore, Mu Lingxian was completely furious. Now that things had developed to this point, it did not have much to do with the dead palace master. If anything, it was just a fuse. Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian continued to fight fiercely. The continent where Immortal Palace was located also became precarious as the two of them fought fiercely. In the sky, spatial cracks were brutally torn open. These spatial cracks were torn open by the shockwaves of Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian's battle. At the same time, the Earth annihilation was also shaking. Huge cracks began to appear. If this continued, just as Gong Nantian said, the continent would not be able to hold on for long. Looking at the fierce battle between Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian, Xiao Chen was also helpless. However, he could not interfere at all. What a joke! With Xiao Chen's current strength, he probably would not be able to block even a single shockwave. Just as Xiao Chen was helplessly looking at Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian, Long Qing, Xian Yuan Ling, Gu Ling Yao and the others finally arrived. They immediately came to Xiao Chen's side. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Xiao Chen was stunned. He then looked at Gu Ling Yao and the other two and said, "Why are you all here?" "We are worried about you," Gu Ling Yao said coquettishly. Now that there were experts from Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace fighting fiercely, it was naturally very dangerous. The arrival of Gu Ling Yao and the other two inevitably made Xiao Chen worried. However, before Xiao Chen could speak, Xian Yuan Ling said, "What do we do now? Do we leave, or?" Now, the best way was naturally to leave. After all, it was meaningless for Xiao Chen and the others to join, let alone gain any benefits. However, after hearing Xian Yuan Ling's words, Xiao Chen smiled bitterly. Leave? If he could leave, he would have left long ago. Why would he wait until now? Xiao Chen felt that Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian were simply joking. They fought as they pleased. Moreover, from the looks of it, the two of them would not stop until there was a winner today. It was obviously not a good idea to continue like this. Moreover, Xiao Chen already felt that the continent under his feet was beginning to show signs of collapse. If they continued to fight like this, the continent would really not be able to hold on. Just as Xiao Chen was thinking about how to deal with it, Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian's attacks became more and more violent. Between their movements, there was a power that could destroy heaven and earth. With a punch, it was no longer a matter of heaven and earth collapsing, it was a matter of destroying heaven and earth. However, even so, the two of them still had no intention of stopping. On the contrary, their auras continued to rise. It was as if they would not stop until one of them was dead. After the two of them collided head-on, they were forced to retreat a few steps. Just as the two of them were about to continue fighting, an old man suddenly appeared on the scene and shouted at the two of them. "Wait!" The person who came was Tenzu from the primordial world. Although his cultivation was not as good as Mu Lingxian and Lin Yun's, Mu Lingxian and Lin Yun subconsciously stopped what they were doing when they heard this. In terms of strength, Tenzu naturally could not be compared to a world lord. However, Tenzu's existence was very special. Without Tenzu, a universe would not be able to operate normally. Therefore, Mu Lingxian still gave face to Tenzu. Seeing that the two of them had stopped what they were doing, Tenzu looked at Mu Lingxian and said helplessly with a bitter smile, "Hall Master, what are you doing? Are you trying to destroy the primordial world?" If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If Lin Yun wants to fight, I'll accompany him." Hearing this, Mu Lingxian snorted coldly. Obviously, the anger in his heart had not dissipated at all. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2447. The fierce battle between Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian had reached its climax. In just a short period of time, the continent where Immortal Palace was located was already on the verge of collapse. Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian's fierce battle had reached its climax. In just a short period of time, the continent where Immortal Palace was located was already on the verge of collapse. The rivers flowed backward, the sky fell, and the earth cracked. This was the result of a few moves between Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian. If the battle dragged on a little longer, the continent would probably not be able to hold on. It wasn't just this continent. If the two continents weren't stopped, the entire Hongmeng world would probably be severely damaged. After all, a battle between world lords was equivalent to a major earthquake for any universe. Tenzu from the Hongmeng world had no choice but to show up. If he didn't show up, the Hongmeng world would really be destroyed by these two people. The heavenly ancestor was well aware of Mu Lingxian's personality. When he saw that Mu Lingxian was still angry, the heavenly ancestor smiled bitterly and turned to Lin Yun. "Greetings, Lord Lin. I hope Lord Lin will not take action again." Lin Yun was the world lord of the Hongmeng world, so Tenzu also addressed Lin Yun as Lord Lin. Tenzu was very familiar with Mu Lingxian, but Tenzu was unfamiliar with Lin Yun. After all, Lin Yun wasn't from the Hongmeng world. Moreover, after Lin Yun came to the Hongmeng world, Tenzu had only seen Lin Yun once. As for Lin Yun, she obviously didn't have much interest in Tenzu. Although Tenzu was the will of the entire Hongmeng world and represented the heavenly Tao, so what? People like Lin Yun had already transcended the heavenly Tao and didn't fear Tenzu at all. Moreover, although Tenzu from the Hongmeng world was stronger than Tenzu from the Great Thousand World, he was only comparable to the Ancestor realm. Lin Yun really didn't care about this little strength. Therefore, Lin Yun didn't have much interest in Tenzu from the Hongmeng world. In the entire Hongmeng world, the only person Lin Yun was interested in was Mu Lingxian. At this time, hearing Tenzu's words, Lin Yun said indifferently, "I can stop, but I'm afraid that some people won't." After saying that, Lin Yun glanced at Mu Lingxian indifferently. Mu Lingxian naturally couldn't endure such a glare. He immediately snorted coldly. "Humph. Let your son, Lin Feng, enter the immortal demon road, and I will let bygones be bygones." As Gong Nan Tian said, Mu Lingxian was a person who cared about face. Previously, he wanted Lin Feng to enter the immortal demon road, and now, Mu Lingxian still insisted on letting Lin Feng enter the immortal demon road. Hearing Mu Lingxian's words, everyone knew that it was obviously impossible to let Lin Feng enter the immortal demon road. Not to mention other things, Lin Yun would definitely be the first to disagree. As expected, Lin Yun's eyes flashed coldly, and she said coldly, "Then let's continue." Having said that, Lin Yun was about to attack again. Seeing this, Mu Lingxian refused to budge an inch. The heavenly ancestor felt bitter in his heart, but he had no choice but to stop them. Master Lin, please wait. He absolutely couldn't let these two guys attack again. Otherwise, the Hongmeng world would really be destroyed. However, this time, perhaps because of Mu Lingxian, Lin Yun didn't give Tenzi any face. She glanced at him indifferently. Lin Yun said indifferently, "This has nothing to do with you. Piss off. Otherwise, if I accidentally kill you, don't blame me." Lin Yun was originally from the Hongmeng world. Naturally, she didn't need to give face to Tenzu. Hearing this, Mu Lingxian was even more furious. He was about to attack. But at that moment, a voice interrupted their battle. "Master, as long as someone from Yun Palace enters the Immortal Demon Road, will this matter be resolved?" The sudden voice stunned Mu Lingxian and Lin Yun. They looked at the source of the voice and saw Xiaochen, who was dressed in white, looking at them calmly. The previous sentence obviously came from Xiaochen. Looking at Xiaochen, Mu Lingxian asked indifferently, "What, do you plan to enter the Immortal Demon Road on behalf of Lin Feng?" "That's right." Hearing this, Xiaochen didn't hide his thoughts and nodded very straightforwardly. Xiaochen had no choice. Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian didn't want to give in. At this time, someone had to come out and give the two of them a way out. No one from Immortal Palace and Yun Palace was willing to come out and smooth things over. The Hongmeng world Tenzu and Lin Yun didn't seem to be interested. Therefore, the most suitable person on the scene was naturally Xiaochen. After all, Xiaochen and Yun Palace were old friends and knew each other. Secondly, Xiaochen didn't offend Immortal Palace. Xiaochen was the most suitable person to say these words. However, as soon as Mu Lingxian's voice fell, Lin Yun said coldly, "Xiaochen, don't make trouble. This has nothing to do with you. Take your people and leave." Lin Yun obviously didn't want Xiaochen to meddle in other people's business. However, Xiaochen didn't pay attention to this, but he cursed helplessly in his heart. "You think I want to meddle? You two great gods are fighting happily, but if the Hongmeng world is destroyed by you, how can I return to the Great Thousand World?" In order to return to the Great Thousand World, Xiaochen naturally couldn't let the two continue to fight. While thinking, Xiaochen slowly rose into the air and came in front of Mu Lingxian and Lin Yun. This was the first time Xiaochen faced the two world leaders, Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian. In the eyes of others, Xiaochen seemed to be standing on the same level as Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian. For the first time, the three of them gave people the feeling that they were on equal footing. Of course, this was just an illusion. After all, with Xiaochen's current strength, it was impossible for him to be on equal footing with Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian. When Lin Yun became the world leader of the Great Thousand World, it was possible. However, Xiaochen obviously didn't have time to pay attention to this now. He looked at Mu Lingxian. Xiaochen took the initiative to bow and salute. "Senior, I am willing to take Lin Feng's place to enter the Celestial Demon Road." Xiaochen was willing to take Lin Feng's place, which was enough to give Mu Lingxian face. Tenzo also looked at Mu Lingxian from the Hongmeng world and transmitted his voice to him. "Palace leader, that's enough. Do you really want to destroy the entire Hongmeng world?" Xiaochen's words undoubtedly gave Mu Lingxian a way out. Tenzo also wanted Mu Lingxian to quickly climb down the pole and stop fighting with Lin Yun. It was meaningless, and the Hongmeng world couldn't withstand the two of them. As for the result of Xiaochen entering the Celestial Demon Road, Tenzo didn't care. How could he care so much now? As long as he could calm the battle between Mu Lingxian and Lin Yun, everything else could be put aside for the time being. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2448. Xiaochen's appearance gave Mu Lingxian a way out, but Lin Yun disagreed. Lin Yun looked at Xiaochen and scolded him helplessly. Xiaochen's appearance gave Mu Lingxian a way out, but Lin Yun disagreed. Lin Yun looked at Xiaochen and scolded him helplessly. "Xiaochen, you're crazy. This is not a joke. Stand aside and don't meddle in other people's business. Lin Yun had also heard about the Immortal Demon Road. She knew that it was a forbidden area of Immortal Palace. It was said that the Immortal Demon Road used to be a secret place with many opportunities. However, compared to those opportunities, the Immortal Demon Road was more dangerous. Therefore, over time, the Immortal Demon Road became a forbidden area of Immortal Palace. It was specially provided for those disciples who violated the rules of Immortal Palace to redress their grievances. Therefore, as long as one could come out of the Immortal Demon Road alive, all the previous mistakes could be forgotten. However, how could it be so easy to walk out of the Immortal Demon Road? Not to mention that Xiaochen was only a half-step sovereign master. Even if a real sovereign master entered it, it would still be extremely dangerous. Lin Yun motioned for Xiaochen to step down, but Xiaochen did not listen. Instead, he smiled at Lin Yun. "Palace Master, I have already thought about it. I will replace Lin Feng to enter the Immortal Demon Road. I hope Palace Master can help me." Compared to Mu Lingxian, Xiaochen's attitude towards Lin Yun was obviously more intimate. After all, Xiaochen and Lin Yun had contact before. Therefore, Xiaochen called Mu Lingxian Senior and Lin Yun Palace Master. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Lin Yun was stunned. She couldn't help but feel grateful. From the exchange of blows just now, Mu Lingxian's reputation as the world lord of the Hongmeng world was not undeserved. Lin Yun was not completely confident that she could defeat him. After all, they were both world lords. It would be strange if Mu Lingxian was too weak. If they continued to fight, both sides would suffer. Xiaochen stood up at this time, obviously giving both sides a way out. Besides, Xiaochen was willing to enter the Celestial Demon Road on behalf of Lin Feng. This in itself was enough to make Lin Yun feel grateful. After all, Lin Feng was her only son. However, with Lin Yun's personality, she naturally would not watch Xiaochen fall into danger. Moreover, this matter had nothing to do with Xiaochen. Xiaochen was not a member of Yun Palace. She was grateful, but Lin Yun did not agree with Xiaochen entering the Celestial Demon Road. In this regard, Xiaochen was also extremely helpless. "Of course I don't want to enter the Celestial Demon Road, but what can I do? I can only watch you fight and then destroy the Hongmeng world. At that time, I won't be able to go back to the Great Thousand World." In order to protect the way back to the Great Thousand World, Xiaochen was really going all out. Therefore, no matter how Lin Yun opposed, Xiaochen had always insisted that he was willing to enter the Celestial Demon Road. He only hoped that Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian could stop. In the face of Xiaochen's insistence, Lin Yun fell into silence for a while. On the other side, Mu Lingxian was obviously persuaded by Tenzu at this time. Like Lin Yun, Mu Lingxian was not sure that he could defeat Lin Yun. Although the previous fight between the two was very short, and both of them had not used their trump cards, even so, Mu Lingxian did not feel that he could win. From Mu Lingxian's point of view, continuing the fight would only result in a lose-lose situation for both sides. Now that Xiaochen had taken the initiative to help him out, just as the Sky Ancestor had said, Xiaochen was giving him a way out. Mu Lingxian looked at Xiaochen with a trace of curiosity and asked faintly, "You are Xiaochen, right? You are from the Great Thousand World?" Hearing Mu Lingxian's words, Xiaochen nodded and replied, "Yes." Mu Lingxian did not know much about the Great Thousand World. Seeing Xiaochen nod, Mu Lingxian paused and continued, "Do you know the dangers of the Celestial Demon Road? Are you sure you want to enter the Celestial Demon Road on behalf of Lin Feng?" "I am sure." Hearing this, Xiaochen nodded and replied without thinking. Wasn't this nonsense? Xiaochen did know the dangers of the Celestial Demon Road, but what else could he do? Anyway, Xiaochen could see that Mu Lingxian was definitely going to ask for an explanation today, and it was not a perfunctory one. Seeing Xiaochen nod directly, Mu Lingxian was a little surprised, but he quickly nodded and said, "All right, then. In that case, let's forget about this matter. As long as you enter the Celestial Demon Road, regardless of whether you live or die, I will not pursue this matter." Moreover, if you can come out of the celestial demon road alive, I will give you an opportunity. Xiao Chen's performance had indeed interested Mu Lingxian. Although Mu Lingxian looked young, in terms of age, he was definitely much older than Xiao Chen. He was probably comparable to Jun Wuya. Therefore, in Mu Lingxian's eyes, Xiao Chen was indeed a junior, and a junior that he was very interested in. He came from an unknown universe, the Great Thousand World, and his cultivation was only at the half-step emperor realm. However, at this time, he had the courage to stand up. Moreover, in front of him and Lin Yun, the two world lords, Xiao Chen's performance had always been neither servile nor overbearing. To be able to do this was indeed impressive. Mu Lingxian had a good impression of Xiao Chen. As for Lin Yun, Mu Lingxian glanced at him and ignored him. He said coldly, "Look at the celestial demon road tomorrow." After that, Mu Lingxian looked at Xiao Chen and said indifferently, "Take care of yourself." As his voice fell, the matter seemed to have come to an end, but all of a sudden, all the important things were on Xiao Chen's head. Entering the celestial demon road, Xiao Chen was certainly not seeking death. Now that Mu Lingxian had agreed that he would enter the celestial demon road on behalf of Lin Feng, and no longer pursue the previous matters, Xiao Chen should consider how to come out of the celestial demon road alive. There was no intention to restrict Xiao Chen's freedom, and Mu Lingxian was not worried that Xiao Chen would escape. In the Hongmeng world, even if Xiao Chen ran to the ends of the earth, Mu Lingxian had a way to catch him back. Lin Yun looked at Xiao Chen in front of him and said helplessly, "Why do you have to go so far? Why are you doing this? You should have heard of the dangers of the immortal demon road." "I have no choice. I have to go back to the great world. I can't watch the two seniors destroy the Hongmeng world." Hearing this, Xiao Chen said with a smile. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Lin Yun was stunned. At the same time, Lu Bingning and the other women, Lin Feng, Lin Shui, Gu Lingyao, Long Qing, Xian Yuan Ling, and the others also came over. As soon as they came up, Lin Feng spoke first. "I don't need you to replace me. It's just the celestial demon road, I'll go by myself." Lin Feng's character was obviously very arrogant. However, he didn't give Xiao Chen a reply at all. Gu Lingyao on the side had already angrily pinched Xiao Chen's waist and shouted, "Are you crazy? Do you know what the celestial demon road is? How dare you go? Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 2449. Xiao Chen actually took the initiative to ask to enter the immortal demon road, which made Gu Lingyao and the other two girls very worried. In this regard, Xiao Chen also smiled and said to the three girls, "Let's talk about it when we get back." Xiao Chen actually took the initiative to ask to enter the immortal demon road, which made Gu Lingyao and the other two girls very worried. In this regard, Xiao Chen also smiled and said to the three girls, "Let's talk about it when we get back." The conflict between the two sides was temporarily settled, but all of this was based on the premise that Xiao Chen was willing to replace Lin Feng and enter the immortal demon road. Xiao Chen took the initiative to stand up, which could be regarded as giving Mu Lingxian a way out. They didn't stay in Immortal Palace for too long. Xiao Chen followed the group of people from Yun Palace and quickly returned to Yun Palace. Mu Lingxian wasn't worried that Xiao Chen would run away. In any case, according to the agreement, Xiao Chen would confidently go to Immortal Palace tomorrow morning and enter the Immortal Demon Road. After returning to Yun Palace's palace, Lin Yun took the initiative to say to Xiao Chen, "Come with me." Lin Yun took the initiative to call Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Xiao Chen didn't refuse. He just said to Gu Lingyao and the other two girls, "You go back first and wait for me." Humph. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Gu Lingyao tenderly snorted. Obviously, the anger in her heart hadn't subsided. The reason why Gu Lingyao was angry was entirely because Xiao Chen actually asked to enter the Immortal Demon Road. She was worried about Xiao Chen's safety. In Gu Lingyao's eyes, even if Yun Palace and Immortal Palace both suffered losses, it didn't matter. Anyway, as long as Xiao Chen was fine, it was fine. However, Xiaochen, this idiot, actually took the initiative to enter the Immortal Demon Road. This really made Gu Lingyao very angry. Looking at Gu Lingyao's unhappy expression and her mouth high, it felt like she was saying, "I'm very unhappy right now." In this regard, Xiaochen could only helplessly smile. On the other hand, Lu Bingning, Lan Shi, and the other girls also took the initiative to chat with Gu Lingyao and the other two girls. Lu Bingning and the other girls took the initiative to interact with Gu Lingyao and the others. Soon, the girls started chatting while Xiaochen and Lin Yun left together. Once again, they returned to Lin Yun's residence. It was still the same simple thatched cottage. The two of them sat opposite each other. Lin Yun looked at Xiaochen with a different look in her eyes. Xiaochen's actions indeed surprised Lin Yun. After all, the dangers of the Immortal Demon Road were not just words. Looking at Xiaochen, Lin Yun gradually revealed a smile. "Do you know the dangers of the Immortal Demon Road? If you go in, it's almost certain death." Hearing this, Xiaochen nodded and said, "I've heard a little about it, but there's no other way. I can't just watch the two of you fight to the death." Hearing Xiaochen's words, Lin Yun's eyes narrowed slightly as if she wanted to see through Xiaochen. After a long while, Lin Yun chuckled and said, "Are you afraid that you can't return to the Great Thousand World?" Lin Yun's words exposed Xiaochen's thoughts. He was unwilling to watch the Cloud Palace and the Immortal Palace fight to the death. The biggest reason was that he was worried that he could not return to the Great Thousand World. After all, whether Xiaochen could return to the Great Thousand World or not depended on Mu Lingxian. After all, Mu Lingxian was the world master of the primordial world. If he did not agree, Xiaochen could not return to the Great Thousand World through the wormhole. Hearing Lin Yun's words, Xiaochen did not hide it and simply nodded and admitted, "Yes, there is indeed such a reason." Speaking of this, Xiaochen paused for a moment, then continued, "As for the dangers, from the day we martial artists were able to embark on the path of cultivation, we were already accompanied by danger. Moreover, isn't there still a slim chance of survival on the Immortal Demon Road?" "Ha, well said." Lin Yun laughed loudly. After chatting with Xiaochen for a while, Lin Yun had a better impression of Xiaochen. Although Xiaochen's cultivation was still very low, Lin Yun could foresee that in the future, Xiaochen would definitely stand at the peak. Moreover, the Great Thousand World did not have a world master yet. In Lin Yun's opinion, Xiaochen had the potential to become a world master. After chatting for a while, Xiaochen also found an opportunity to express his objection to Lin Yun. "Palace Master, as a matter of fact, I have a favor to ask of you. That day, I met Palace Master Qin Feng, and after his advice, I thought of staying in the Cloud Palace to cultivate. After all, compared to the vast Thousand World, the Cloud Palace is indeed much stronger." Xiaochen expressed his intention of staying in the Cloud Palace to cultivate for a period of time. After finishing his sentence, Xiaochen looked at Lin Yun with glinting eyes, not knowing how exactly Lin Yun would answer him. After all, if he were to stay in the Cloud Palace, he would definitely need to use the cultivation resources of the Cloud Palace. Xiaochen wasn't sure if Lin Yun would be willing to let an outsider like him use the cultivation resources. Besides, even if Lin Yun rejected Xiaochen's request, he wouldn't be surprised. Hearing that Xiaochen wanted to stay in the Cloud Palace to cultivate for a period of time, Lin Yun wasn't surprised and just said with a smile, "Everything will wait until you come out of the Immortal Demon Road. Since you've already spoken, you have to go through the Immortal Demon Road." Lin Yun didn't agree or refuse, but from Lin Yun's words, it wasn't difficult for Xiaochen to understand that Lin Yun had already agreed, but it was because of the Immortal Demon Road. In front of so many people, Xiaochen took the initiative to say that he was willing to enter the Immortal Demon Road on behalf of Lin Feng. Now that things had come to this, Xiaochen definitely couldn't escape and had to enter the Immortal Demon Road. After entering the Immortal Demon Road, it was uncertain whether Xiaochen could come out alive. Therefore, Lin Yun's meaning was obvious. If he came out alive, everything would be fine, but if he was in the Immortal Demon Road, then he couldn't blame anyone. Junior understands. Hearing this, Xiaochen nodded. Seeing this, the smile on Lin Yun's face did not diminish. Don't be too nervous. Although the Immortal Demon Road is dangerous, it is also said that it contains a lot of opportunities, and some of them are big enough to make people crazy. Moreover, this time you chose to go through the Immortal Demon Road for my Cloud Palace. Naturally, I won't sit idly by. You can keep these things. With these things, your chances of going through the Immortal Demon Road will be greatly increased. As she spoke, Lin Yun threw a storage ring to Xiaochen, which contained a lot of magic weapons and medicinal pills. As Lin Yun said, with these things, Xiaochen's chances of success were indeed greatly increased. This was because the quality of the things given by Lin Yun was absolutely superior to the vast thousand world. In particular, Lin Yun also gave Xiaochen a natal spirit tablet. This natal spirit tablet was personally made by Lin Yun. It could exert the power of Lin Yun's full blow. Although it could only be used once, it was absolutely precious and priceless. After all, who was Lin Yun? She was the world lord of a universe. Without these things, Xiaochen would have a slim chance of survival if he went to the Immortal Demon Road. However, with these things given by Lin Yun, Xiaochen's chances of survival in the Immortal Demon Road were 50-50. There was an average chance that he could come out alive, and such a chance was already extremely heaven-defying. Without being pretentious, Xiaochen simply accepted the storage ring thrown to him by Lin Yun. He then cupped his hands and bowed. Junior thanks Palace Master. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. Chapter 2450. Xiaochen wasn't pretentious or hypocritical. He simply accepted the storage ring that Lin Yun threw over. Xiaochen was very clear about the dangers of the Immortal Demon Road. Since Lin Yun was willing to help him, it was naturally for the best. Xiaochen wasn't pretentious or hypocritical. He simply accepted the storage ring that Lin Yun threw over. Xiaochen was very clear about the dangers of the Immortal Demon Road. Since Lin Yun was willing to help him, it was naturally for the best. Seeing Xiaochen accept the storage ring so easily, Lin Yun smiled with satisfaction. After chatting for a while, Xiaochen took the initiative to say goodbye. Xiaochen also nodded in agreement. Go, I won't accompany you tomorrow. I don't want to beat up Mu Lingxian when I see him. Be careful. Hearing Lin Yun's words, Xiaochen smiled helplessly. Her temper was really overbearing. Mu Lingxian was the world lord of the Hongmeng world, but in Lin Yun's words, he seemed to be someone who could be beaten up as she wished. He left with a bitter smile and returned to his residence. When they saw that Xiaochen had returned, Gu Lingyao and the other two women, who were talking to Lu Bingning and the others, immediately stood up to greet him. Seeing that the three women's complexions had improved, Xiaochen bowed and smiled secretly. It seemed that Lu Bingning and the others had indeed enlightened them. The three women surrounded Xiaochen. Seeing this, Lu Bingning and the others also stood up and said to Xiaochen with a smile, "Since you're back, we should also leave. Do your best tomorrow and be careful." After speaking, Lu Bingning and the others directly left. Gu Lingyao and the other two women personally stood up to send them off and sweetly called out, "Sister Bingning, take care." They had already addressed each other as sisters. Xiaochen didn't care much about this. After all, Lu Bingning, Lan Shi and the other girls were Lin Yun's wives. Xiaochen was happy to see Gu Lingyao and the other girls getting along well with Lu Bingning and the other girls. However, after Lu Bingning and the other girls left, it was time for Xiaochen to suffer. After seeing Lu Bingning and the other girls off, Gu Lingyao and the other two girls pulled Xiaochen to the pavilion in the courtyard and sat down. Gu Lingyao was the first to speak. "Husband, you really don't let us be at ease. Do you know how dangerous the Immortal Devil Road is? How can you make such a decision on your own?" "That's right. What should we do if anything happens to you?" Hong Xiu chimed in when she heard this. After being surrounded by the three women and being criticized for a long time, Xiaochen was speechless. However, he also knew that the three women were worried about him. In the end, he could only smile and comfort them. Don't worry, there won't be any problems this time. Palace Master Lin Yun gave me a lot of life-saving things that have never been seen before in the Great Thousand World. They are very strong, so there won't be any problems in protecting my life. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Gu Lingyao and the other two women were slightly relieved. They also knew about Lin Yun's strength. This was a task on the same level as Mu Lingxian. Since Lin Yun intended to protect Xiao Chen's life, then there shouldn't be any problems. Seeing that the three women's expressions had eased, Xiao Chen struck while the iron was hot and said, "Moreover, I'm doing this so that I can return to the Great Thousand World in the future. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Under Xiao Chen's comfort and repeated assurances, the three women didn't say anything more. The night was silent. This night, Xiao Chen wasn't too simple. In fact, the life-saving things in the storage ring that Lin Yun gave Xiao Chen were enough to let Lin Yun safely leave the Immortal Demon Road. As long as Lin Yun didn't seek death, it was basically enough to deal with any danger in the Immortal Demon Road. After all, although the Immortal Demon Road was dangerous, it was still a little lacking for a world lord like Lin Yun. As a world lord, in this world, it wasn't that there weren't many things that could threaten Lin Yun. Many places that were regarded as places of death by the world were not dangerous in Lin Yun's eyes. For example, the Immortal Demon Road. Early the next morning, Xiao Chen prepared to go to the Immortal Palace and enter the Immortal Demon Road. Long Qing, Xian Yuan Ling, and Gu Lingyao said that they wanted to go with Xiao Chen no matter what. Unable to endure the crowd, Xiao Chen finally nodded in agreement. At the same time, the monk and Taoist also came to Xiao Chen's residence and the group set off for the Immortal Palace. Because of the battle yesterday, more than half of the Immortal Palace was destroyed, but this morning, the Immortal Palace was restored to its original state. In this regard, Xiao Chen and the others were very puzzled. This was a little too fast. Even if it was to recultivate, it couldn't be done in one night. Looking at the perfect Immortal Palace, Xiao Chen and the others were surprised. The monk at the side explained in a timely manner. This Immortal Palace is shrouded in a formation. Just like a person, any damage can be healed in the shortest time. You mean this Immortal Palace can recover automatically? Then these buildings. That's right. These buildings heal by themselves, just like a person's wound. He had never heard of a formation that could heal by itself. Xiao Chen had never heard of such a formation. With a shocked mood, the group quickly arrived at the entrance of the Immortal Demon Road. At this time, there was already an elder of the Immortal Palace waiting here. He specially opened the Immortal Demon Road for Xiao Chen. Without wasting any time, when he saw Xiao Chen and the others coming, the elder directly opened the entrance of the Immortal Demon Road. Then, he said to Xiao Chen indifferently, "The Palace Master has already said that as long as you enter the Immortal Demon Road, no matter what the result is, the previous matter will be written off. Go in." Looking at the entrance of the Immortal Demon Road in front of him, Xiao Chen was about to step forward, but at this moment, Gong Nantian suddenly appeared and shouted, "Wait." Upon hearing Gong Nantian's words, Xiao Chen came to a halt and looked at Gong Nantian suspiciously. Xiao Chen had seen Gong Nantian before, but he wasn't familiar with him. He only knew that Gong Nantian was one of the 9 palace masters of the Immortal Palace and was also an ancestor realm powerhouse. Seeing Xiao Chen looking at him suspiciously, Gong Nantian directly threw a token to Xiao Chen. Seeing this, Xiao Chen didn't know what this token was. On the other hand, the elder's expression changed and he said helplessly, "Palace Master, isn't this a little against the rules? This token should be something very important. Otherwise, the elder wouldn't have such a big reaction." But in this regard, Gong Nantian waved his hand indifferently and said, "What's against the rules? Just pretend you didn't see it. If there's any problem, just let Tian come to me. I will talk to him." After his voice fell, Gong Nantian turned to look at Xiao Chen and a smile appeared on his face. "Boy, I'm very optimistic about you. Take this token. With this token, you won't be in any danger in the Immortal Demon Road. Maybe you can even have a good harvest. Okay, don't just stand there. Quickly go in. With this token, he wouldn't be in any danger in the immortal demon road. Hearing this, Xiaochen looked at the token in his hand and felt a little suspicious. He thought to himself, is this token so awesome? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2451. A token could allow him to run amok in the immortal demon road? Hearing Gong Mansion's words, Xiaochen suspiciously looked at the token in his hand, then raised his head to look at Gong Nantian. His eyes seemed to say, I don't believe you. A token could allow him to run amok in the immortal demon road? Hearing Gong Mansion's words, Xiaochen suspiciously looked at the token in his hand, then raised his head to look at Gong Nantian. His eyes seemed to say, I don't believe you. Indeed, even the storage ring Lin Yun gave him, which contained many life-saving treasures, didn't dare to say that it could allow him to run amok in the immortal demon road. As for Nangong Guan, in terms of strength, she definitely couldn't compare to Lin Yun. She was only in the ancestor realm. However, he had thrown a command medallion to Xiaochen, saying that with this medallion, he would be able to run amok on the immortal demon road. How could Xiaochen believe this? Facing Xiaochen's suspicious gaze, Gong Nantian angrily scolded, Get lost, brat. If you don't believe me, go in and try it yourself. After saying this, Gong Nantian didn't give Xiaochen a chance to react. He waved his hand, and a powerful force directly dragged Xiaochen into the entrance of the immortal demon road. Seeing Gong Nantian forcibly send Xiaochen into the immortal demon road, Gu Lingyao angrily said, How can you do this? She thought that Gong Nantian wanted to harm Xiaochen. Facing Gu Lingyao's fierce appearance, Gong Nantian only felt ashamed and coldly snorted. Humph, little girl, you don't know anything. This old man isn't harming him. Let me tell you, that token is the immortal demon token. With this token, you can run amok in the immortal demon road. This old man spent a lot of effort to get this immortal demon token. If it weren't for this brat being pleasing to the eye, this old man wouldn't have spent so much effort. Gong Nantian said with a displeased expression. Meanwhile, the immortal palace elder on the other side had a strange expression. He thought to himself, I spent quite a bit of effort to obtain this immortal devil order. You old bastard, you speak of it so lightly. Gu Lingyao and the others, including the monk and Taoist, were not from Immortal Palace, so they naturally didn't know about this immortal devil order. At the same time, they didn't know that this immortal devil order had always been in the care of one of Immortal Palace's 9 great palace masters, He Tian. He Tian was Immortal Palace's punishment hall master. Like Gong Nantian, he was one of Immortal Palace's 9 great hall masters and was in charge of Immortal Palace's punishments. Since the immortal demon road was a path to redress the grievances of those disciples who violated the sect's rules, it was naturally managed by He Tian. As the head of the punishment palace, He Tian was famous for his stubbornness in Immortal Palace. Today, Gong Nantian gave the immortal devil order to Xiaochen. Based on this elder's understanding of He Tian, it was definitely not He Tian who took the initiative to give it to Gong Nantian. Because with He Tian's personality, it was impossible for him to do such a thing. In this case, it could only be said that Gong Nantian used other methods to snatch the immortal devil order from He Tian. Thinking of how Gong Nantian snatched the immortal devil order from He Tian, this elder's face darkened. This Gong Nantian really didn't change at all. Gong Nantian was definitely the most eccentric existence in Immortal Palace. Not to mention his eccentric personality, his actions were completely based on his own preferences. Others simply couldn't understand him. As the #1 palace master of Immortal Palace, Gong Nanshan's strength was indeed superior to the other 8 palace masters. He was fully deserving of the title of #1. However, as for his personality, it was indeed unflattering. Just as this elder was thinking about this, a wave of cold air suddenly descended. Then, an old man with a black left eye appeared. At a glance, one could tell that he was beaten up. His appearance was somewhat comical. However, the old man didn't care about the injury on his face. As soon as he appeared, he looked at Gong Nantian with a cold expression and shouted coldly. Gong Nantian, you treacherous bastard, haha, He Tian, don't be impulsive. Listen to my explanation. Hearing this, Gong Nantian said with a smile. However, He Tian didn't listen to him at all. He was about to attack and shouted angrily. Cut the crap. Gong Nantian, return my immoral devil order. Otherwise, I will fight you to the death today. As he spoke, He Tian had already made his move. Gong Nantian had no choice but to fight back. Immoral Palace's two great ancestor-level palace masters directly began to fight. Although the monk and Taoist priest were also confused by this, these two fellows' personalities were to watch a good show, not fearing that things would get out of hand. They brought Gu Lingyao and the others back a certain distance, and then became the audience in high spirits. Although they didn't know why the two of them started fighting, it was really exciting to watch. Especially He Tian, he didn't hold back at all. The monk and the Taoist priest were happy to watch the show. On the other side, the elder of Immoral Palace revealed an expression of as expected. Gong Nantian had used some tricks to snatch the Immoral Devil Order from He Tian's hands. Last night, Gong Nantian had said that he wanted to drink with He Tian, but who knew that this dog had actually drugged the wine? The two of them were from the same sect, and they were both the 9 great palace masters of Immoral Palace. However, this bastard Gong Nantian actually drugged the wine. He Tian didn't guard against Gong Nantian at all, so he was easily tricked. By the time He Tian realized that he was tricked, Gong Nantian had already snatched his storage ring and forced him to take out the Immoral Devil Order from it. With He Tian's character, he naturally wouldn't do it at first. However, this old dog Gong Nantian's methods were extremely vicious. He actually tried to kill a fellow disciple. In the fierce battle, when He Tian thought of the experience last night, the hatred in his heart couldn't help but surge. Both of them were completely blood red. Last night was definitely the most humiliating night in He Tian's life. What tiger stool? What rocking chair? That old dog Gong Nantian used all the punishments in the punishment hall on him just to force him to take out the Immoral Devil Order from his storage ring. With He Tian's cultivation, the punishments in the punishment hall naturally couldn't take his life. They couldn't even cause serious injuries to He Tian. However, compared to the injuries on his body, He Tian's mental trauma was the most serious. After attacking with hatred, He Tian couldn't help but shout angrily, Gong Nantian, you despicable and shameless bastard. You even tried to kill a fellow disciple. Today, I'll fight you to the death. Either you or me. Hey, hey, hey. Old man you have to make yourself clear. When did I try to kill you? I just wanted to borrow the Immoral Devil Order. You're too stingy. You can't blame me for this. You. Gong Nantian, don't you dare slander me. Die. Gong Nantian's reply made He Tian even more furious. He immediately threw a punch at Gong Nantian. Gong Nantian didn't dodge or avoid it. In terms of strength, Gong Nantian was still slightly stronger. Therefore, even though He Tian attacked with hatred, it didn't pose much of a threat to Gong Nantian. From the beginning to the end, Gong Nantian dealt with it with ease. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2452. He Tian attacked in anger. However, in Gong Nantian's opinion, He Tian's strength was still lacking. After all, the title of First Palace Master was not for nothing. Therefore, no matter how angry He Tian was, Gong Nantian could deal with him with ease. He Tian was even more furious about this. When he thought of Gong Nantian drugging him and robbing his immoral demon token, He Tian's anger rose uncontrollably. Many of Immoral Palace's disciples naturally sensed the intense battle between Gong Nantian and He Tian. Many of them gathered in the distance and watched curiously. They didn't know why Gong Nantian and He Tian would suddenly fight. They did not understand the reason behind it. Of course, no one dared to rashly step forward to stop it. Only the other hall masters could only smile bitterly. As one of Immortal Palace's 9 great palace masters, the other palace masters understood Gong Mansion's nature extremely well. This fellow was definitely a weirdo that others couldn't figure out. When he would do something, it was impossible to predict what he would do. Even Mu Lingxian smiled bitterly at this time. This Gong Nantian is really a headache. Mu Lingxian naturally knew the whole story. Moreover, when Gong Nantian fought with Etian, Mu Lingxian already knew about it. However, Mu Lingxian did not stop it. Firstly, Gong Nantian did not have the intention to harm Etian. Secondly, Gong Nantian wanted the Immortal Demon token just to help Xiaochen. Mu Lingxian did not object to this. Mu Lingxian had a good impression of Xiaochen. Since Gong Nantian wanted to help him, Mu Lingxian naturally had no reason to refuse. Gong Nantian, Etian, quickly come and see me. However, it was not the same to let them fight like this. Moreover, judging from Etian's appearance, he was obviously very angry. However, he could not do anything to Gong Nantian. Therefore, Mu Lingxian had to step in and stop them from fighting like this. After hearing Mu Lingxian's message, Gong Nantian smiled and said, Etian, the palace master has spoken. Stop fighting. Let's see the palace master first. Looking at Gong Mansion's mischievous grin, Etian was unable to restrain his anger. He coldly snorted and said, Humph, Gong Nantian, this matter isn't over. There's also that brat. When he comes out of the Immortal Demon Road, I won't let him off. The kid that Etian was referring to was naturally Xiaochen. At this moment, Xiaochen had been forcefully thrown into the Immortal Demon Road by Gong Nantian. He had thought that there would be some danger, but after traveling for some time in the Immortal Demon Road, Xiaochen discovered that there wasn't any danger at all. The Immortal Demon Road could be regarded as a road of trial. With one thought, one could become an immortal, and with another, one could become a demon. From the moment he stepped onto the Immortal Demon Road, Xiaochen was surrounded by endless darkness. There were terrifying void storms all around him. Originally, Xiaochen had to withstand these void storms by himself, but because he had the Immortal Demon token, Xiaochen discovered that there was a layer of mysterious power protecting his body. The violent void storms around him had no way of harming him. There was no pressure at all. In response, Xiaochen looked at the Immortal Demon token in his hand. This seemingly ordinary token was really as Gong Nantian had said. It could allow him to run amok in the Immortal Demon Road. This token is pretty good. Since he had the Immortal Demon token's protection, Xiaochen revealed a smile on his face and softly muttered to himself. As he spoke, Xiaochen walked forward. When he had just entered the Immortal Demon Road, apart from the violent void storms around him, Xiaochen didn't encounter any other dangers. Moreover, because of the Immortal Demon token, these void storms couldn't get close to Xiaochen at all. Xiaochen walked forward in a relaxed manner. He had no idea how long he had been walking. Suddenly, a village appeared before him. Looking at the small village in front of him, Xiaochen was puzzled. There are other people in the Immortal Demon Road? Logically speaking, the Immortal Demon Road should be considered an independent small world. However, this small world shouldn't be man-made, but formed naturally by heaven and earth. Therefore, the Immortal Demon Road had its own set of laws of heaven and earth. However, Xiaochen understood how dangerous the Immortal Demon Road was. Under such dangerous circumstances, it didn't make sense for there to be a village in the Immortal Demon Road. After all, even an End Realm expert would have a 90% chance of survival in the Immortal Demon Road, not to mention other people. Martial artists with low cultivation wouldn't be able to survive in the Immortal Demon Road. However, Xiaochen had indeed arrived at a village. Although it wasn't large, it did exist. Although he had doubts in his heart, Xiaochen didn't have any other choice. There was only one path in front of Xiaochen, and this path led directly to the village. Therefore, no matter what, Xiaochen had to enter the village. Moreover, as soon as he entered the immortal demon road, Xiaochen had already tried it. It was impossible to fly within the immortal demon road. There seemed to be some kind of restriction placed in the sky, making it even more impossible to tear through the void. With a trace of doubt in his heart, Xiaochen strode towards the village. Not long after, Xiaochen arrived at the entrance of the village. Here, Xiaochen saw an old man who was drowsily sitting on a recliner at the entrance of the village. Seeing Xiaochen arrive, the old man didn't seem to be surprised at all. He just glanced at Xiaochen indifferently and closed his eyes to rest again. It was as if he didn't care who Xiaochen was or where he came from. Seeing the old man's calm appearance, Xiaochen frowned. Xiaochen could feel the aura of life from the old man. In other words, the old man was a living person. He was a real person, and not an illusion. However, what made Xiaochen feel even more strange was that Xiaochen couldn't sense the old man's cultivation. Or rather, the old man didn't have any cultivation at all. He was just an ordinary person. This was strange. Even End-Realm experts had a 90% chance of dying in the immortal demon road. How could an ordinary person survive? This was obviously not very likely. With doubts in his heart, Xiaochen took the initiative to walk in front of the old man and asked softly, "Old man, may I ask where this place is?" Xiaochen took the initiative to chat with the old man. Hearing this, the old man opened his eyes again. The expression in his eyes was very turbid. He looked at Xiaochen and said in a hoarse voice, "This is Wang Village. You little kid, you're so strange. You walked here yourself, and you still don't know where this is." After speaking, the old man closed his eyes again and no longer paid attention to Xiaochen. In this regard, Xiaochen could only bitterly smile. He didn't get anything useful from the old man. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 2453. Outside the immortal demon road, Guling Yao's group didn't leave. However, the monk and Taoist had already disappeared. They knew that immortal palace wouldn't do anything to Xiaochen, so they weren't worried about Xiaochen's safety. There was no point in staying here. Moreover, the monk and Taoist weren't easy to deal with, so they directly left. Outside the immortal demon road, Guling Yao's group didn't leave. However, the monk and Taoist had already disappeared. They knew that immortal palace wouldn't do anything to Xiaochen, so they weren't worried about Xiaochen's safety. There was no point in staying here. Moreover, the monk and Taoist weren't easy to deal with, so they directly left. However, Guling Yao's group of 3 insisted on staying to wait for Xiaochen. The immortal palace elder didn't stop them. Anyway, the entrance to the immortal demon road was already closed. They couldn't enter, so it was fine for them to stay. He couldn't help but worry about Xiaochen. On the other side, in Mu Lingxian's residence, He Tian scolded Gong Nantian in front of Mu Lingxian. Mu Lingxian couldn't help but smile bitterly. All right. He Tian, Nantian is indeed at fault. However, since it has come to this, let's forget about it. Mu Lingxian didn't want to pursue the matter. After all, it wasn't the first time Gong Nantian had done something like this. There was no point in pursuing him now. Mu Lingxian tried to persuade He Tian, but Gong Nantian's face was ashen. Gong Nantian acted as if nothing had happened and happily drank his wine. Looking at Gong Nantian's appearance, He Tian couldn't help but coldly say to Mu Lingxian, "Palace Master, look at this guy. Where does he look like he's admitting his mistake?" He Tian was unhappy with Gong Nantian's attitude. Mu Lingxian couldn't do anything about it. Gong Nantian's temper had been like this since he was young. What could he do? Helplessly smiling bitterly, He Tian still didn't give up and said, "Palace Master, the immortal demon road has always been managed by the Punishment Palace. What does the Punishment Palace care about? Fairness. Now that Xiaochen has entered the immortal demon road with the immortal demon order, other disciples will know about it. How can the Punishment Palace convince the disciples in the future?" He Tian was a stubborn old man. In his opinion, Gong Nan Tian giving the immortal demon order to Xiao Chen was a cheating method. He Tian couldn't accept it. You're familiar with the immortal demon road, He Tian. You should know the road. He Tian's has the goods. But, even if he has the order, it's not sure. Even demon road. Roads, you know it. Hearing Mu Lingxian's words, He Tian was stunned. Indeed, with the immortal demon order, one could be completely unscrupulous on the path of demon subduing because the path of demon subduing would not harm the person holding the immortal demon order. However, even so, some tests still depended on one's own strength and the immortal demon order couldn't do anything about it. Therefore, Mu Lingxian's meaning was simple. Even if Xiao Chen had the order, it couldn't guarantee that Xiao Chen could pass the road of immortal demon. Therefore, He Tian didn't need to be so agitated. Knowing that Mu Lingxian was telling the truth, He Tian didn't refute. But he still snorted at Gong Nan Tian to show his dissatisfaction. Gong Nan Tian chose to ignore it. He shook his head while drinking, which made He Tian furious. The matter between He Tian and Gong Nan Tian was quickly settled under Mu Lingxian's appearance. After all, He Tian couldn't disobey Mu Lingxian. Moreover, they had been friends for so many years. Although He Tian was angry, he knew Gong Nantian's character. This guy was helpless, and with such a helpless situation, what else could he do? Just admit that he was unlucky. Xiao Chen naturally didn't know what was happening in the outside world. After chatting with the old man for a while at the entrance of the village, Xiao Chen saw that the old man no longer paid any attention to him. He didn't ask for a snub and walked directly into the village. Just as Xiao Chen stepped into the village, the old man slowly opened his eyes. A meaningful smile appeared on his lips. He looked at Xiao Chen's back and whispered softly. "Wang Cun, this is like catching a turtle in a jar." As the old man's voice fell, a magical scene appeared. A white light directly enveloped Xiao Chen. In an instant, Xiao Chen's figure disappeared. Naturally, Xiao Chen himself also felt this power, but there was no way he could resist it. Under the shroud of the white light, Xiao Chen only felt that the world was spinning. After an unknown amount of time, when Xiao Chen regained consciousness again, he found himself standing on a busy street. There were noisy shops on both sides of the street. The street was even more crowded with people coming and going. It was already very strange for such a bustling scene to appear on the immortal demon road. However, Xiao Chen was stunned when he saw everything in front of him. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he said, This is Lingshan County City." Xiao Chen was naturally no stranger to Lingshan City. This was the place where he was born and grew up. Moreover, the Lingshan city before him seemed to be the same as when he was young. Xiao Chen was shocked. Soon, he found that his body had undergone earth-shaking changes. It was as if he had returned to his childhood in an instant. There was a youthful taste on his face. 15 years old, this was his appearance when he was 15 years old. Looking at his body that was obviously shorter and his face that was much younger, Xiao Chen recognized that he looked like when he was young. Did I return to my youth? He was puzzled. He was clearly on the immortal demon road. How could he have inexplicably returned to his childhood? Moreover, his cultivation had completely disappeared. His original cultivation of half-step emperor was now only at the completion of the yellow realm. This cultivation realm was the same as when he was 15 years old. Everything was so real that Xiao Chen did not know whether this was an illusion or reality. After walking around the street, Xiao Chen was sure that this was Lingshan City. However, Xiao Chen still did not understand what this meant. However, he was 80% sure that this was the doing of the immortal demon road. There was no way to solve it because he was not the master of the sword sect, who was a half-step emperor. He was just a young boy with a cultivation of the yellow realm. Without any clues, Xiao Chen came to the Xiao family mansion according to his memory. It was exactly the same as when he was young. There was no change at all. Seeing Xiao Chen, the two Xiao family guards at the gate took the initiative to greet him with a smile. "Young master, you're back." The two guards obviously knew Xiaochen. Looking at the two people in front of him, Xiaochen just nodded slightly. Xiaochen's mind was in a mess. On the one hand, everything was too real. On the other hand, Xiaochen did not know what the immortal demon road meant. Could it really be to return him to his youth and reverse yin and yang? Let him live a new life? Thinking about this in his mind, Xiaochen stepped into the home that he was once so familiar with without saying a word. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 2454. Just a second ago, he was still on the immortal demon road, and the next second, he had inexplicably returned to his youth. How could Xiaochen be unfamiliar with this version of himself? Just a second ago, he was still on the immortal demon road, and the next second, he had inexplicably returned to his youth. How could Xiaochen be unfamiliar with this version of himself? The young master of the Xiao family, the #1 genius of Lingshan City, all kinds of halos shrouded him. At this time, Xiaochen had yet to enter the East Sword Pavilion, and was just a talented young man. After hundreds of years, Xiaochen's mood could be imagined as he once again returned to this home that he had a deep memory of. There was joy, excitement, and at the same time, a deep sense of uneasiness. It couldn't be more appropriate to describe it as a complex feeling. However, reason kept telling Xiaochen that all of this was an illusion. However, when Xiaochen came to the front hall and saw the young Bairuyue, Xiaochen couldn't help but be stunned on the spot. It was still that familiar face, but the current Bairuyue gave off a completely different feeling. She looked at Xiaochen with eyes full of affection. Seeing Xiaochen standing outside in a daze, Bairuyue, who was originally talking to the housekeeper, smiled and said, "What's wrong? Why are you staring blankly?" Hearing Bairuyue's words, Xiaochen opened his mouth and softly called out. "Mother, okay, mother has something to do here. You go to the backyard first. Chenmuxue is here. You can have a good chat with her. This girl is very good." Hearing this, Bairuyue said with a smile. She didn't wait for Xiaochen's reply and turned to continue talking with the housekeeper. When Xiaochen heard the three words Chenmuxue, he was also stunned. Xiaochen didn't have any deep feelings towards these three words, but he had to admit that Chenmuxue occupied a very important position in his youth. The Xiao clan, the Chen clan, and the Ma clan were known as the three great clans of Lingshan County. As the young master of the Xiao clan and the only son of Xiao Qing, Xiaochen dominated the younger generation of the Lingshan County. He had shown off his abilities and made the Xiao clan proud. As for Chenmuxue, she was the eldest daughter of the Chen family. Although her talent and cultivation were not as good as Xiaochen's, her looks were outstanding. She was known as the most beautiful woman in Lingshan Prefecture. Moreover, as the Xiao clan and the Chen clan were both part of the three great clans in Lingshan Commandery City, Chenmuxue and Xiaochen had known each other since they were young. Chenmuxue had always admired Xiaochen, and this admiration did not change as they grew older. On the contrary, as Xiaochen became more outstanding, Chenmuxue became even more infatuated with Xiaochen. The two of them were childhood sweethearts, and many people in Lingshan County saw the two of them as a golden couple. After all, one was a talented and elegant young man, while the other was a beautiful and elegant young lady. Naturally, they were a good match. In addition, Bairuyue and Xiao Qing were also very fond of Chenmuxue and wanted to matchmake the two of them. Therefore, Chenmuxue naturally became a frequent guest of the Xiao clan. When he heard that Chenmuxue was here, Xiaochen frowned slightly. However, he didn't say anything and immediately turned to walk towards the backyard. In his heart, he kept telling himself that all of this was just an illusion. Xiaochen naturally didn't have any feelings towards Chenmuxue. He didn't hate her, let alone love her. Xiaochen treated Chenmuxue as if she was a stranger. It was more appropriate to use the word indifferent to describe it. Moreover, Chenmuxue had died long ago. Xiao Chen never thought that he would actually have any interactions with her. Although this wasn't reality, everything in front of him seemed so real. According to his memories, Xiao Chen directly returned to the small courtyard where he lived. As the young master of the Xiao clan, Xiao Chen's treatment was naturally better. The place where he lived was also the best courtyard in the Xiao clan, second only to Xiao Qing and Bairuyua's residence. In the courtyard, there were pavilions, artificial mountains and lakes. The scenery was pretty good. At least in Lingshan County City, there was probably no better courtyard than this. When Xiao Chen strode into the courtyard, a beautiful figure took the initiative to run over. It was a young lady wearing a green dress. She stood in front of Xiao Chen and sweetly called out with a smile on her face. "Brother Xiao Chen." The young lady's appearance was indeed not bad. She could be described as devastatingly beautiful. Looking at the young lady in front of him, Xiao Chen couldn't help but be immersed in his memories. Chen Muxue, his childhood playmate. However, fate made fools of people. Meeting her again, Xiao Chen's heart couldn't help but ripple. Of course, this ripple naturally had nothing to do with love. At most, it was a little sigh of the past. Quickly regaining his senses, Xiao Chen looked at Chen Muxue and indifferently said, "You can go." There was nothing much to say to Chen Muxue. Xiao Chen was most concerned about how to break the illusion in front of him. In Xiao Chen's opinion, he must have fallen into an illusion. However, this illusion was too heaven-defying, making it difficult for people to distinguish between reality and illusion. Even Xiao Chen couldn't see the slightest flaw in it. But no matter what, Xiao Chen must find a way to break it. Otherwise, how could he leave the immortal demon road? Xiao Chen's attitude was cold. Upon hearing his words, Chen Muxue was taken aback. Her eyes instantly turned red. She looked at Xiao Chen timidly and said with an aggrieved expression, "Big brother Xiao Chen, I'm here too." Chen Muxue obviously had something to tell Xiao Chen. However, Xiao Chen didn't appreciate it at all. Before Chen Muxue finished her sentence, Xiao Chen interrupted her. "I'm not interested. You can go." Xiao Chen didn't listen to what Chen Muxue wanted to say. As soon as his voice fell, he strode away and locked himself in the room, thinking about how to break the illusion in front of him. Looking at Xiao Chen's back as he left, Chen Muxue couldn't help but cry in the face of such a heartless Xiao Chen. 2 lines of clear tears flowed down from the corners of her eyes. She looked at Xiao Chen's tightly shut room with teary eyes and said sadly, "Big brother Xiao Chen, I really like you." Chen Muxue's admiration for Xiao Chen had never changed since she was a child. The Chen family even specially visited Xiao Qing and Bairuyue to discuss their marriage. Xiao Qing and Bairuyue didn't object to this marriage. On the contrary, they were very supportive, at least in this illusion. However, Xiao Chen did not agree, so there was no result. Chen Muxue came today to try one last time. She wanted to tell Xiao Chen all the words in her heart. She wanted to tell Xiao Chen how much she loved him and that it had not changed since they were children. However, Xiao Chen didn't give Chen Muxue this chance at all. Perhaps there wouldn't be such a chance in the future because the young sect master of the Ju Mountains sect had come to the Chen family to propose marriage to Chen Muxue. Chen Muxue's father had also agreed. In the illusion, the development of things seemed to be different. It was no longer blindly developing according to Xiao Chen's memory. Instead, there were deviations. After all, in Xiao Chen's memory, the young sect master of the Ju Mountains sect didn't come to the Chen family to propose marriage at this time. However, this was the case in the illusion. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 2455. Looking at Xiao Chen's room with tears in her eyes, Chen Muxue wanted to knock on the door and tell Xiao Chen everything that was in her heart. However, she did not have the courage. Xiao Chen's cold attitude made Chen Muxue feel at a loss. Chen Muxue stood there in a daze. After a while, she turned around and left in a daze. Her back looked very bleak. Xiao Chen did not know what Chen Muxue was thinking. Of course, he did not care at all. At this moment, Xiao Chen's only thought was how to break the illusion in front of him. He kept telling himself that everything in front of him was an illusion and not real. However, no matter how hard Xiao Chen tried, he found that everything in front of him was flawless. There was no way to break it. He could not break it, and his cultivation was only in the yellow realm. What could a yellow realm cultivator do? Naturally, he tried to restore his cultivation, but it was to no avail. It was as if his cultivation was in the yellow realm and not in the half-step sovereign realm. Xiao Chen tried all night, but in the end, he failed. It was not until the next morning when Bai Ruyue came to his courtyard that Xiao Chen had no choice but to give up. In the courtyard, Xiao Chen's face was a little ugly. Bai Ruyue said softly, "Chen, today the Zhu Mountain sect went to the Chen family to propose marriage. Are you really not going to do anything?" Bai Ruyue came in person early in the morning to tell Xiao Chen that Chen Muxue was about to be engaged. Xiao Chen was slightly stunned and said with some confusion, "What marriage proposal?" He did not know about the engagement between Chen Muxue and the young master of the Zhu Mountain sect. After all, in his memory, Chen Muxue had never been engaged to the young master of the Zhu Mountain sect. However, with Bai Ruyue's explanation, Xiao Chen quickly learned the whole story. He frowned slightly. The development of this matter seemed to be somewhat different from what he remembered. Things that didn't happen in his memory were happening in this illusion. Didn't this mean that things wouldn't develop according to his memory in the future? This illusion seemed to be more troublesome than Xiao Chen had imagined. Moreover, Xiao Chen had already tried it last night. If he was killed, then it was very likely that he would really die. In other words, even if this was an illusion, if he was killed in the illusion, then he would probably die in reality. Or it could be said that his spirit would dissipate, leaving only his body. Everything in the illusion was so real that it was not a simple illusion. Once he died in the illusion, he would not be able to escape the calamity in reality. Xiao Chen frowned and pondered. Seeing this, Bai Ruyue thought that Xiao Chen was upset by the news, so she tried to comfort him. "Chen, since you can't let it go, then go and take a look. No matter what, don't let yourself regret it." Hearing Bai Ruyue's words, Xiao Chen was stunned. Unable to let go? Xiao Chen did not have such thoughts at all. Regarding Chen Muxue, there was nothing that he could not let go of. He did not care about her at all. What Xiao Chen was thinking about now was how to break the illusion. While Xiao Chen and Bai Ruyue were talking, Chen Muxue had not slept for the entire night in the Chen family of Lingshan County City. Only now did her father order someone to ask her to go to the main hall. She followed the order and went to the main hall of the Chen family. Once she entered, Chen Muxue saw her father chatting with a young man. A flattering smile hung on her father's face. On the other hand, the young man appeared to be very indifferent. The young man was slightly older than Xiao Chen. His cultivation had already reached the mysterious Yuan realm. Although his appearance and temperament were not as good as Xiao Chen's, he was still considered to be of good quality. Seeing Chen Muxue slowly walk into the hall, the young man sized Chen Muxue up from head to toe. Then, he smiled and nodded. He seemed to be very satisfied. Next to him, Father Chen took the initiative to stand up and introduce her to the young man. "Young sect master, this is my daughter, Chen Muxue. Muxue, this is the young sect master of Zhu Mountain sect, Wang Ming." Hearing her father's words, Chen Muxue bowed to Wang Ming. However, there was not much joy on her face. In response, Wang Ming nodded indifferently and did not say anything. Chen Muxue naturally knew why Wang Ming had come. After all, someone from Zhu Mountain sect had already come to propose, and her father had already agreed. Initially, Chen Muxue had been very resistant to this marriage because she had always liked Xiao Chen. However, Xiao Chen's attitude towards her yesterday had completely disappointed Chen Muxue. In addition, her father had constantly told her that a marriage alliance with Zhu Mountain sect would definitely be a joyous occasion for the Chen family. Zhu Mountain sect was the most powerful sect in Lingshan County. With Zhu Mountain sect as their backer, the Chen family would definitely become the #1 family in Lingshan County. For the sake of the family's prosperity, her father hoped that Chen Muxue could marry Wang Ming. On one side was the indifferent Xiaochen, and on the other was the young sect master of Ju Mountain sect, Wang Ming, whom she did not like, but who could make the family prosper. In the end, Chen Muxue chose Wang Ming. Thus, after chatting for a while, Chen Muxue did not refuse her father's suggestion. At Wang Ming's invitation, the two of them planned to tour Lingshan County together. On the street, Wang Ming had a faint smile on his face. Actually, from the first time he had seen Chen Muxue, he had been stunned by her appearance. Even in Ju Mountain sect, she could be considered the #1 beauty. However, as the young sect master of Ju Mountain sect, Wang Ming naturally could remain calm. Thus, he had a faint smile on his face the entire time as he chatted with Chen Muxue in a gentle tone. He had the temperament of an elegant young master. "Muxue, I've been to Lingshan County a few times, but I'm not very familiar with it. I'll need you to lead the way," Wang Ming said gently as he looked at Chen Muxue. Hearing this, Chen Muxue also smiled slightly. "Young master, don't worry. Muxue understands." Looking at the smile on Chen Muxue's face, Wang Ming only felt his heart skip a beat, and for a moment, it was as if he had fallen in love. Under Chen Muxue's lead, the two of them strolled around Lingshan County. In the end, Chen Muxue also brought Wang Ming to Moon Lake in Lingshan County. Moon Lake was the most popular place in Lingshan County, and also the place with the most beautiful scenery. There were many pleasure boats on Moon Lake, and one could drink and have fun here. One could see the best scenery in Lingshan County, and it was the favorite place of the city's dignitaries. Just as the two of them reached Moon Lake and were about to board the pleasure boat, Chen Muxue, who had been acting intimately with Wang Ming, suddenly froze on the spot. This was because Xiaochen was walking towards them. She had never thought that she would actually meet Xiaochen here. Furthermore, Wang Ming was standing next to her. Seeing Xiaochen walking towards her, Chen Muxue couldn't help but panic. She was afraid that Xiaochen would see her with another man. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2456. Although she had agreed to marry Wang Ming, in her heart, the person she had always liked was still Xiaochen. She was with Wang Ming because of his status, and for the sake of the entire family, but the most important reason was still Xiaochen. Although she had agreed to marry Wang Ming, in her heart, the person she had always liked was still Xiaochen. She was with Wang Ming because of his status, and for the sake of the entire family, but the most important reason was still Xiaochen. Because of Xiaochen's indifference to her, Chen Muxue's heart had almost died. It was at this time that Wang Ming came to propose marriage, and Chen Muxue naturally agreed. However, although she had already decided to marry Wang Ming, when she saw Xiaochen, she still felt a little guilty, as if she had been caught in an affair. Why is big brother Xiaochen here? What will he think when he sees Wang Ming? Her heart was in a mess, and she was extremely nervous as she made wild guesses. But Chen Muxue's worries were clearly unfounded, because Xiaochen had no intention of paying attention to her at all. He had already seen Chen Muxue and Wang Ming from afar. At first, Xiaochen was indeed stunned, but not because of Chen Muxue, but because of Wang Ming. In the morning, he had already heard from Bai Ruiyue that Wang Ming had come to propose marriage, and he also knew that Wang Ming was the young sect leader of Yuashan sect. Looking at Wang Ming, a strange look flashed in Xiaochen's eyes. Things in this illusion really seemed a little different from what he remembered. But very quickly, Xiaochen no longer paid attention to this. Right now, the most important thing was to break the illusion, but unfortunately, he had yet to find a way. Completely ignoring Chen Muxue, Xiaochen directly walked past her indifferently. But when they brushed past each other, Chen Muxue was completely stunned when she saw that Xiaochen was completely ignoring her. Big brother Xiaochen. Seeing Xiaochen ignore her so much that he didn't even look at her, Chen Muxue thought that Xiaochen was angry at her for being with another man. Chen Muxue was really overthinking it, but Xiaochen had no intention of explaining at all. However, to Wang Ming's surprise, Just as Xiao Chen was about to leave, Chen Muxue directly let go of him and shouted at Xiao Chen's back. "Big brother Xiao Chen, it's not like that." Chen Muxue wanted to explain so that Xiao Chen wouldn't misunderstand her, but her actions caused Wang Ming's face to instantly turn ashen. Xiao Chen also turned around with an irritated expression and said, "What happened has nothing to do with me." Xiao Chen was speaking from the bottom of his heart. No matter what happened between Chen Muxue and Wang Ming, it indeed had nothing to do with him, and Xiao Chen didn't care at all. But just because Xiao Chen thought this way, it didn't mean that other people thought the same. After Xiao Chen finished speaking, Wang Ming had already strode up to Xiao Chen with an extremely gloomy expression and looked at Xiao Chen with an ashen face. "You're Xiao Chen?" Wang Ming had naturally heard of Xiao Chen's name. After all, Xiao Chen's reputation in Lingshan County City was so great that it was hard not to know him. He also knew that Xiao Chen and Chen Muxue were childhood sweethearts, and that Chen Muxue had always loved Xiao Chen since they were children. When he thought about how the woman he liked had another man in her heart, the proud and arrogant Wang Ming felt disgusted, as if he had eaten a fly. His eyes were filled with coldness, but Xiao Chen didn't care at all about this and said, "What does it have to do with you?" After saying this, he turned around and prepared to leave. In his memory, he had never had any contact with Wang Ming. After all, when he was young, Xiao Chen had left Lingshan County City to gain experience and directly entered Dongjian Pavilion. As for this Ju Mountain sect, in Xiao Chen's eyes, it was simply too inferior, and he didn't care about it at all. Since he hadn't had much contact with Ju Mountain sect, he naturally didn't know Wang Ming. However, in the face of Xiao Chen's indifferent attitude, the anger in Wang Ming's heart soared to the sky. He shouted angrily, "You're courting death." Then, he fiercely threw a punch at Xiao Chen. Wang Ming's cultivation was at the mysterious Ian stage, which was a whole realm higher than Xiao Chen's. When he threw a punch, Chen Muxue immediately cried out, "Brother Xiao Chen, be careful." Chen Muxue was worried about Xiao Chen, but when Wang Ming heard this, he became even angrier and unconsciously increased the strength of his hand. Feeling the sound of something breaking behind him and the strong energy, Xiao Chen didn't choose to meet it head-on. Instead, he turned sideways and perfectly dodged Wang Ming's punch. Xiao Chen didn't choose to meet Wang Ming head-on because he was only at the Yellow Realm, and his physical body wasn't as strong as when he had practiced the tempered battle body. Under these circumstances, if he chose to meet Wang Ming head-on, he would really be courting death. However, although his cultivation was only at the Yellow Realm, his fighting spirit was still intact. As a half-step sovereign master, Xiao Chen's fighting spirit was naturally incomparable to Wang Ming's. After perfectly dodging Wang Ming's punch, Xiao Chen took advantage of the opportunity to throw a punch. In the face of Xiao Chen's sudden counterattack, Wang Ming didn't have time to react, and the punch hit Wang Ming's abdomen. Wang Ming used the yellow-level martial arts technique, the Tiger Fist. He didn't know how many years it had been since he last used it. After all, with Xiao Chen's current cultivation, the yellow-level martial arts technique was simply useless. But even so, with Xiao Chen's foundation, the Tiger Fist instantly reached the level of the great perfection, and its power was incomparably great. Wang Ming fiercely spat out a mouthful of blood, and his whole body was directly sent flying. His eyes were full of shock. Wang Ming had never thought that he would be defeated by a boy at the Yellow Realm with a single punch. Not only Wang Ming, but the others around him also didn't expect this at all. There was a whole realm between the two, but in the end, it was Xiao Chen who defeated Wang Ming with a single punch. Moreover, Wang Ming had made the first move. Everyone around was stunned, including Chen Muxue. Chen Muxue also didn't think that Xiao Chen could defeat Wang Ming so easily. As the young lord of the Ju Mountain sect, Wang Ming was obviously not an embroidered pillow. He definitely had strength, but even so, in front of Xiao Chen, Wang Ming was still so vulnerable. The result was beyond everyone's expectations. Chen Muxue stared blankly at Xiao Chen with a trace of infatuation in her eyes. Xiao Chen was able to defeat Wang Ming with a single punch with a cultivation of the Yellow Realm, which was enough to show that Xiao Chen was 100 times, or even 1,000 times better than Wang Ming. Chen Muxue couldn't help but fall deeply in love with him. Chen Muxue, who thought highly of herself, had always thought that only a man like Xiaochen was worthy of her. Facing Chen Muxue's infatuated gaze, Xiaochen ignored it. After casting a faint glance at Wang Ming, Xiaochen directly turned and left without the slightest intention of staying. Please add, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 2457. Xiaochen turned around and left right away. For Xiaochen, someone like Wang Ming was nothing to him, he was not worth mentioning at all. Xiaochen turned around and left right away. For Xiaochen, someone like Wang Ming was nothing to him, he was not worth mentioning at all. Watching Xiaochen walk away, Chen Muxue turned her head to look at Wang Ming. In the end, she gritted her teeth and chased after Xiaochen. Watching Chen Muxue chase after Xiaochen, Wang Ming, who was lying on the ground with blood at the corner of his mouth, was furious. Chen Muxue's actions undoubtedly showed that between Xiaochen and himself, she had chosen Xiaochen. Xiaochen, you're courting death. And Chen Muxue, you be *tch, no one knew what Wang Ming was thinking. At that moment, Xiaochen had already strode away, and Chen Muxue quickly caught up with him. She looked at Xiaochen and said hesitantly, Big brother Xiaochen, no, it's not like that. Chen Muxue wanted to explain, but Xiaochen cast her an indifferent glance and said, I'm not interested in you. You don't have to explain anything to me. Also, don't follow me anymore. With that, Xiaochen strode away while Chen Muxue stood blankly in place. In her opinion, big brother Xiaochen must have misunderstood her. For a moment, Chen Muxue regretted agreeing to marry Wang Ming. She should have persevered a little longer. If she had persevered a little longer, big brother Xiaochen wouldn't have misunderstood. She returned home in a daze. Seeing Chen Muxue come back alone, Father Chen asked doubtfully, Why are you alone? Where's young sect master? Chen Muxue had gone out with Wang Ming, but now she was the only one back, which made Father Chen puzzled. Hearing this, Chen Muxue suddenly raised her head and looked at her father, her eyes full of determination. Father, I don't want to marry Wang Ming anymore. What? Father Chen was stunned when he heard this. Soon after, he angrily shouted. Everything had been settled, but now Chen Muxue said that she didn't want to get married. This made Papa Chen furious. Looking at her father's increasingly ugly expression, Chen Muxue didn't give in this time. Instead, she stubbornly looked at her father. In Chen Muxue's heart, she was wrong. She had always been wrong. She clearly liked Xiaochen, but she kept lying to herself. Today, Xiaochen had caught her with Wang Ming. Only Chen Muxue knew how she felt at that time. Chen Muxue already knew that she liked Xiaochen very much. She would never forget Xiaochen for the rest of her life, let alone accept other men. Therefore, Chen Muxue made a decision. Other than Xiaochen, she would not marry anyone else in this life. Seeing Chen Muxue's stubborn and resolute eyes, Father Chen was even angrier. What kind of joke was this? He had already agreed to the marriage with the Ju Mountain sect. If he went back on his word, what would happen to the Chen family? Who would bear the wrath of the Ju Mountain sect then? The Xiao family? The Xiao family naturally wouldn't be able to escape. They would definitely bear the wrath of the Ju Mountain sect, but what about the Chen family? Would the Chen family be spared? Obviously, that was impossible. When the time came, the Ju Mountain sect's wrath would definitely overturn the Chen family. You? Are you crazy? Do you know what consequences this will bring to the Chen family? Father Chen shouted coldly, pointing at Chen Muxue. But in the face of her father's rebuke this time, Chen Muxue was different from her usual self. She still refused to compromise and said, I don't care. I want to marry big brother Xiaochen, and I will only marry big brother Xiaochen. In the illusion, even Chen Muxue had changed. In his memory, Chen Muxue didn't love Xiaochen so much. Instead, because of Xiaochen's rejection, she was so angry that she wanted to destroy the Xiao family. Hearing Chen Mushua's answer, Father Chen couldn't help but tremble with anger. He slapped Chen Mushua's face fiercely and then shouted coldly, "Guards, keep an eye on her. Without my orders, she is not allowed to take a step out of the Chen family." At this point, Chen Mushua had to marry whether she wanted to or not. She had no right to refuse. For the sake of the entire Chen family, Chen Mushua could only marry Wang Ming. Hearing this, several Chen family guards quickly stepped forward and immediately took Chen Mushua away and put her under house arrest. Xiao Chen didn't know what had happened in the Chen family. Xiao Chen walked around Lingshan County City but didn't discover anything. Everything was so real. Helpless, he could only return home. Xiao Chen tried to recover his cultivation and also wanted to see if there were any restrictions in his body. But after a round of examination, he was still disappointed. There was no clue at all. Xiao Chen had been looking for a way to break the illusion, but he had been unable to find anything. In this illusion, or rather, in this world, Xiao Chen was like a real person. There was no flaw to be found at all. This kind of life lasted for about 10 days. During these 10 days, even Xiao Chen himself felt that he had gradually begun to adapt to the current life, training every day and being by his parents' side. This kind of feeling suddenly appeared in Xiao Chen's mind, and he was immediately startled. One had to know that this was the precursor to being addicted. What was the scariest thing about an illusion? It was that it could make people sink into it and unable to extricate themselves. You knew that this was an illusion, but you didn't want to break out of it. This was the scariest thing. Once you were addicted to an illusion and couldn't distinguish between reality and illusion, you would very likely sink into the illusion and think that this was the real world. There would be no possibility of escaping. When this feeling appeared, Xiao Chen broke out in a cold sweat. At the same time, he constantly reminded himself that all of this was fake. It was an illusion and didn't exist. However, with the passage of time and the smiling faces of his father, Xiao Qing, and Bai Ruyue, this voice became weaker and weaker, and its effect became weaker and weaker. There were many times when Xiao Chen thought that the immortal demon road had really turned back time, and that everything in front of him was actually real. It was in this kind of torment that a month slowly passed. Xiao Chen had already lived in Lingshan County City for a month. At the age of 15, he had rejuvenated himself for a month. During this month, Xiao Chen indeed seemed to have returned to his childhood. It was also early in the morning that a group of uninvited guests were outside Lingshan County City. There weren't many people in this group, but everyone was wearing the same clothes. They were all from Ju Mountain sect, and Wang Ming was among them. A month had passed, but Wang Ming's face was still extremely gloomy as he walked into Lingshan County City. An old man next to him smiled and said to him, "Young sect master, don't worry. A mere Shao family can't make any waves. This old man can destroy it in an instant. Please add it to your collection, monthly vote, recommend it." End of chapter. Chapter 2458. This old man was an elder of the Ju Mountain sect and had a cultivation at the minor perfection of the earth mirror level. In Lingshan County City, this kind of cultivation was already considered invincible. It had to be said that the strongest person in the Shao, Chen, and Ma families was only at the great perfection of the mystic Ian level. It was impossible for them to withstand an earth mirror level expert. From this elder's words, it was clear that he didn't care about the Shao family at all. In his opinion, Xiao Chen was an ant that he could casually squash and wasn't worth mentioning at all. Hearing this, Wang Ming sneered. "No need. I want Xiao Chen to see me marry Chen Mushua with his own eyes. I also want him to see me and Chen Mushua share a room." Saying this, a cold smile appeared in Wang Ming's eyes. His hatred for Xiao Chen had already started to become a little perverted in his heart. He wanted Xiao Chen to see him ravage Chen Mushua with his own eyes. That should feel very good. After saying this, without waiting for the elder's reply, Wang Ming directly said, "Bring Xiao Chen and his family to the Chen family. I want them to see me and Chen Mushua get married with their own eyes." Faced with Wang Ming's instructions, the elder didn't refuse. Since Wang Ming was already the young sect master, he couldn't disobey him. Very quickly, Wang Ming brought his people to the Chen family, and the elder went to the Xiao family. When Wang Ming arrived at the Chen residence, Chen Mushua's father led a group of senior members of the Chen family to personally receive him. Perhaps because of what had happened last time, Wang Ming's attitude toward the Chen family had clearly undergone a 180-degree change, and was now extremely cold. He sat upright on the main seat with the experts of the Zhu Mountain sect on both sides of him. The Chen family members stood cautiously below, not daring to show the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. Sweeping his cold gaze over the Chen family members below, Wang Ming sneered. "Head of the Chen family, is the wedding ready?" "Young sect master, everything is ready." "Young sect master can take Mushua away at any time," Chen Mushua's father replied respectfully. Originally, it was impossible for the wedding to be held at the Chen residence. It should have been held at the Zhu Mountain sect. However, Wang Ming wanted to take revenge on Xiao Chen and make Xiao Chen watch as he ravaged Chen Mushua. Thus, Wang Ming directly proposed that they consummate their marriage first before holding the wedding at the Zhu Mountain sect. Although many members of the Chen family objected to this in their hearts, no one dared to say it out loud. After all, Wang Ming's attitude toward the Chen family was no longer as polite as before. Chen Mushua had been wronged, but what could they do? If they really angered Wang Ming at this time, it would definitely be a disaster for the Chen family. Seeing how respectful Chen Mushua's father was, Wang Ming nodded slightly, then got up and said indifferently, "I'm going to see Chen Mushua." Hearing that, Chen Mushua's father replied respectfully, "Yes, young sect master, this way please." As he spoke, he personally led Wang Ming to the backyard. For the past month, Chen Mushua had been under house arrest. Although she really wanted to see Xiao Chen, she didn't have the chance at all. In the backyard, Chen Mushua was sitting in a pavilion in the courtyard with a pale face. When she heard the courtyard door open, Chen Mushua turned her head to look. However, her face turned completely pale with just one glance. Wang Ming was definitely the person Chen Mushua didn't want to see the most. It could even be said that she was afraid of him. However, Wang Ming didn't care at all, nor did he care about Chen Mushua's instantly pale face. He said indifferently to Chen Mushua's father, "There's nothing for you to do here." Hearing Wang Ming's indifferent tone, Chen Mushua's father was taken aback, then he nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes, yes, yes, then I'll take my leave first." After saying that, he completely ignored Chen Mushua's pleading gaze and directly left the courtyard. After Chen Mushua's father left, only Wang Ming and Chen Mushua were left in the courtyard. Wang Ming strode over to Chen Mushua and said with a cold smile, "I've already sent someone to the Xiao family. You'll be able to see Xiao Chen very soon." As he spoke, a vicious look flashed across Wang Ming's eyes, and he looked like a wild beast that was about to devour a person. Upon hearing this, Chen Mushua froze on the spot. Xiao family? Wang Ming was going to make a move on Xiao Chen. Chen Mushua's heart was in a panic as she gritted her teeth and looked at Wang Ming. "Let go of Xiao Chen, and I'll marry you." With tears in her eyes, Chen Mushua didn't know what she should do. She knew that she didn't have the power to resist a colossus like Zhu Mountain sect, but for Xiao Chen, she was willing to marry Wang Ming. Of course, in Chen Mushua's heart, she had already made up her mind. As long as Xiao Chen safely escaped from Lingshan County City, she would kill herself. She absolutely wouldn't let Wang Ming have her. It had to be said that in the illusion, Chen Mushua's feelings for Xiao Chen were indeed sincere. However, after hearing Chen Mushua's words, Wang Ming sneered and directly slapped Chen Mushua without warning. 5 red fingerprints instantly appeared on her cheeks, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. Pinching Chen Mushua's chin, Wang Ming slowly lifted her head. Looking at the face in front of him, which was still as beautiful as ever, but incomparably stubborn, Wang Ming's smile was so chilling. "Chen Mushua, do you think that you still have the right to negotiate with me? You're just a slut. I was willing to marry you before, but now, you're only fit to be my plaything. Furthermore, I still have to play with you in front of Xiaochen. Isn't that very exciting? With that, Wang Ming ruthlessly slapped Chen Mushua's face again. Ignoring the pain from her cheek, Chen Mushua's heart ached even more at this moment because of what Wang Ming had said just now. Play with her in front of Xiaochen. These words kept ringing in Chen Mushua's ears. If such a day really came, Chen Mushua probably wouldn't want to live anymore. Thinking about being played by Wang Ming in front of Xiaochen, Chen Mushua couldn't accept it. Chen Mushua's face turned red as she glared fiercely at Wang Ming. She said word by word, "If you dare to hurt Xiaochen, I won't let you have your way even if I have to die." Die? Do you think you can still do it now? Hearing this, Wang Ming sneered and slapped Chen Mushua's face again. Wang Ming wanted to make it difficult for Chen Mushua to die. At least, before he got tired of playing with her, Chen Mushua couldn't die. As for that Xiaochen, Wang Ming wouldn't let him die so easily. Wang Ming wanted to torture these two people. When he thought of the humiliation Xiaochen and Chen Mushua gave him a month ago, the anger in Wang Ming's heart couldn't dissipate. Looking at Chen Mushua, who had been knocked to the ground by him, Wang Ming laughed. "Slut, it's hard for you to die now even if you want to. You can't die without my consent. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.